On a Sunday afternoon in Tijeras, New Mexico, loud explosions shattered the silence. After the noises stopped, they heard a dog yelp, and then silence. It was clear something awful was occurring inside a house. Later, a young man emerged from the house to speak with police, and his statements, along with what the police discovered, shocked the entire community. Join us as we explore this case further, revealing disturbing truth secrets, lies, and a courtroom drama where the distinction between innocence and guilt became more complicated than anyone imagined. The Mestre family wasn't well known in Tijeras, New Mexico, but those who knew them considered them quiet and reserved. The family, consisting of Raimundo Mestre, the father, Bertha Huerta Conde, the mother, their 3 children, Nancy, Adlai, and Brielle. They had moved to the small community around 2021. They rented a house with a large, private yard, and it quickly became one of their favorite things about the house. Raimundo was a hard-working man devoted to his family. Bertha, his wife, was a kind, caring homemaker, well-liked by their neighbors and friends. By 2024, their oldest daughter, Nancy, had moved in with her partner and was pregnant with her first child. As autumn neared, the entire family eagerly awaited the baby's arrival. However, their joy was short-lived. A sudden and tragic event was about to turn their happiness into grief. On Sunday, the 13th of October, just before 2:00 p.m., emergency services received a call from a concerned man. He explained that he had heard several loud bangs at Mestre house next door. They sounded like gunshots to him, 5 or 6 in all, followed by a single gunshot about 10 minutes later. He also thought he heard the distressed cries of a dog. At first, he thought he might be overreacting, but when he tried to reach their family by phone and got no answer, his anxiety grew. He walked to the house and rang the doorbell several times, but there was still no answer. That's when he decided it was time to call the police. Around 2:14 p.m., officers arrived and their body cameras began recording. As they approached the house, they had no idea what they were about to encounter. They knocked on the door. After a few moments of silence, a disoriented and unsteady young man, 24-year-old Adlai, answered. He chillingly stated his family had attacked him. When asked for more information, he said the attack occurred in his bedroom, and a knife was used. The officers told him to come closer. When they asked if he had any weapons, Adlai said yes, and then seemed to reach for something. The officers immediately told him to turn around so they could restrain and search him. Adlai complied. While still in handcuffs, he was asked to recount the events. This time, he stated that his father and sister had attempted to kill him. He claimed his father tried to stab him in the heart with a knife, while his sister held a meat tenderizer. He then confessed, without pausing, that he had killed them both. This was just the start of a story that would become increasingly disturbing and bizarre. Suddenly, Adlai's words quickly became meaningless and incomprehensible. His sentences were disconnected, dreamlike, and made no sense, leaving the officers unsure if he was confessing or simply rambling incoherently. After searching him, officers found a gun in his pants pocket. He gave it to them willingly. They then placed him in the patrol car. The police continued to search the house. At the door, they ordered anyone inside to raise their hands and come out. But no one did. That's when they noticed the first signs of what they were truly dealing with: dark reddish stains on the entryway floor. The patterns were unmistakable. Something violent had happened here. While waiting for backup, the officers began piecing together the grim picture forming before them. Once backup arrived, they entered the house. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Blood droplets were splattered on the walls, and a trail of blood led upstairs, soaking into the carpet. This suggested that someone had been dragged up the stairs. They also found a severely injured dog, which explains some of the blood. After searching every room, they found no sign of the family. The search then moved to the backyard. where they quickly spotted more drag marks leading away from the house. But the yard was vast, stretching far beyond the officer's immediate line of sight. One officer returned to the patrol car, hoping Adlai could narrow down the search area. When police approached Adlai, the boy immediately begged not to be harmed. The officer calmed him, explaining they only needed to know the location of his family. Instead of answering, Adlai asked if the officer had seen his dog, sounding strangely excited. The officer repeated his question about Adlai's family. Adlai finally confessed that the bodies were in the backyard. He then directed the officer to where the bodies were. The search team received the information and quickly found the bodies of the Pardus, of Clordes, 46-year-old Raimundo, 51-year-old Bertha, and 17-year-old Brielle. Adlai's confession to ending their lives was, at least in this detail, the truth. After confirming the deaths, police took Adlai in for questioning. He claimed the bodies were convulsing and foaming at the mouth, and that their wounds had somehow healed. Then, Adlai launched into another nonsensical story, this time involving seismic waves, the Big Ben clock tower, a submarine, and an unknown woman. The detective let him talk for a few minutes before handing him a pen and a piece of paper and asking him to write down his story. Adlai readily agreed. It was at this point the detective understood this interrogation would be far from typical. After informing Adlai of his rights and making sure he understood them, the detective asked him again about the fate of his family. Ultimately, he confessed to shooting their dog. The animal was rushed for emergency veterinary care, suffering from 3 gunshot wounds. Despite the efforts to save it, the injuries were too severe, and the dog had to be euthanized. Back at the crime scene, investigators recovered a mop soaked with reddish stains. In the interrogation room, the detective continued to press for specifics, asking Adlai where his father had been during the attack and where he had delivered the fatal blows. At first, Adlai's words were nonsensical. Eventually, he stated that his father had been in the living room when he sustained the fatal injuries. Although officers had already located bullet casings inside the house, they also found other evidence, a meat tenderizing hammer stained with blood and a bladed weapon. This combination of clues led them to speculate on the sequence of the killings, but Adlai's statements only deepened the mystery. During the home search, officers found documents from September, just weeks before, showing that Adlai had recently been discharged from a mental health facility. He had been treated there for psychosis. The records mentioned he experienced hallucinations and heard voices. Officers photographed these documents as evidence. Later, when asked what he did with the bodies after killing them, Adlai answered with chilling calm, showing no sign of remorse. He said he had intended to bury them. Among Adlai's incoherent written notes, the detective found disturbing references to possession by dark forces and claims that his family had tried to curse him. It became clear there might be far more to his mental state than he was revealing. Left alone again, his behavior became stranger still. At one point, he appeared to hold a conversation with someone who wasn't there. Then, in an unsettling turn, he urinated into a plastic bottle. When the detective returned and realized Adlai's actions, he reprimanded him, telling him he could ask to go to the bathroom. Once more, the detective stepped out, instructing him to behave himself, but Adlai showed no signs of calming down. Instead, his erratic behavior escalated to a disturbing level. He began shouting to God, then suddenly turned to address the men in the room. Rising to his feet, he moved in a way that, captured on camera, would mark the moment the situation took a sharp, alarming turn. Without warning, Adlai began violently kicking the wall of the interrogation room. Within moments, he had created a hole large enough to squeeze through. Escaping into the hallway, he made a direct path toward the elevators. The noise drew the attention of deputies, who intercepted him. Just seconds later, it became clear that the walls of the sheriff's office were never designed to hold someone determined to break out. Deciding it was too risky to keep him inside, they placed him in the back of a patrol car to let him calm down. Once he appeared more settled, Adlai was brought back inside for processing photographs, a buckled DNA swab, and the collection of his clothing. he was issued a temporary jumpsuit and escorted back to the patrol vehicle. This time, the destination was the county jail. Upon arrival, he was placed in an intake holding cell. Investigators found Adlai's sister, Nancy, and had the difficult job of informing her that most of her family had been murdered in a shockingly violent way. She became visibly upset, sobbing, and struggled to understand what was happening. In a later interview with detectives, Nancy explained why Adlai might have brought up possession. She was both disbelieving and angry as she described how her family had minimized or excused Adlai's strange behavior. This was partly because their mother believed Adlai was possessed and not accountable for his actions. However, Nancy disagreed with this explanation, believing that there had been significant warning signs that were ignored. Nancy also told detectives that at the time Adlai was released from the hospital, mental health professionals concluded that he was not a danger to himself or others, and that he had never mentioned any intention of harming his family. When asked about his medication, Nancy confirmed he was prescribed treatment, but admitted he was not taking it consistently. She had confronted him about it herself, worried for his well-being. She said she wasn't the only one. Her mother had even found pills in the trash. Everyone in the household had urged him to take his medication. Despite these issues, Nancy said her brother had appeared normal for months leading up to the killings. Authorities later confirmed that the firearm believed to be the murder weapon was legally registered to their mother. On Monday, the 14th of October, the sheriff held a press conference calling the case highly complex and in need of thorough analysis. He disclosed Adlai's medical history and shared key investigative findings. The sheriff also raised concerns about the state's red flag gun laws, measures that allow authorities to temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others, suggesting that such intervention might have prevented the tragedy. The neighbor who had first called 911, it spoke to reporters as well, still shaken. He said he had never noticed anything alarming about the family and remembered them only as kind and friendly. On Friday, the 18th of October, 5 days after the murders, Adlai appeared in court for his initial hearing. One of the responding officers testified, describing the scene as brutal. Prosecutors told the judge they had recovered 10 9mm shell casings from the property, and that the victims also showed signs of blunt force trauma. The state played security footage from the sheriff's office, showing Adlai breaking through the wall during his attempted escape. Though calmer that day, the sight of the video prompted him to interrupt his own attorney, insisting he wanted to speak. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, he loudly claimed his medication had been stolen and that he had tried to escape because he was afraid. He repeated strange claims about his parents and sister, saying that they spewed strange liquids from their mouths, and urged the media to release forensic photographs to prove he was telling the truth and that he had acted only to save his own life. End of trial. Adlai Mestre was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of evidence tampering, 1 count of extreme cruelty to animals, 1 count of escape from police custody, and 1 count of criminal damage to public property. His attorney argued for supervised release with proper medication, but the judge sided with prosecutors, ruling that Adlai was a danger to the community and ordering him held without bond. Months later, in April 2025, a judge declared Adlai incompetent to stand trial and ordered him transferred to a mental health facility for treatment. His competency will be evaluated again in the future. For now, no updates have been released, and it is presumed that he remains hospitalized, awaiting the court's final decision. Now that the full scope of this harrowing case is known, the question remains: will the justice system ultimately bring closure to the Mestre family? Or will investigative challenges, mental health complexities, and systemic gaps in firearm regulation leave the truth forever clouded? Tammy Engstrom, a 22-year-old mother of a 1-year-old baby, was happily married and deeply devoted to her family. Despite her responsibilities, she also enjoyed spending time with her loved ones. On February 7, 1991, around 5:30 p.m., Tammy dropped her son Casey off at the home of her friend, Sharon King. Sharon had agreed to babysit while Tammy got ready for work. Tammy also planned to meet her uncle after her shift. She worked at the Clover Bar in Hubbard, a small town near a state border with a population of about 7,000. Tammy's mother, Mary Jane Hayes, also worked at the same bar. Tammy arrived at the bar at 6:30 p.m. and worked for about 3 hours. By 9:30 p.m., she had begun feeling unwell and told her mother, Mary, that she wanted to end her shift early. Mary agreed to cover for her. However, instead of going home, Tammy decided to visit another bar, the Nikilo Lounge, a 10-minute drive away in Musbury, Guyana. She had promised to meet her uncle, Daniel Hivner, and didn't want to disappoint him. Daniel was a regular at the Nikilo Lounge, which was a favorite spot for their family. Tammy arrived at the Nikilo Lounge by 10 p.m. and joined Daniel. They drank and talked together. Around 11 p.m., one of Daniel's acquaintances, Kenneth Byros, joined them. Although Kenneth knew Daniel, they weren't close, and this was his first time meeting Tammy. As the group continued drinking, Tammy became severely intoxicated. Witnesses later reported that she could barely stand and even fell off her chair at one point, requiring help from the men. By midnight, they decided to stop giving her alcohol. The group stayed at the bar until it closed at 1 a.m. Although Tammy had sobered up slightly by then, she decided she wanted to drive home. Concerned about her condition, Daniel took her car keys and insisted she shouldn't drive. Since Daniel himself was too drunk to drive, Kenneth offered to take Tammy home, as he appeared to be the most sober among them. Before leaving, they stopped for coffee to help Tammy wake up. After drinking coffee, Tammy fell asleep in Kenneth's car. He reassured Daniel that he would take her home, and he drove off while Daniel left with another friend. Meanwhile, Tammy's husband, Andy, had returned home from work and was waiting for her. They had been married since December 9, 1988, and had been together for years before tying the knot. Around 11:30 p.m., Andy began worrying about her whereabouts. He decided to go out and search for her, stopping first at the Clover Bar where she worked. Bringing along a small gift to mark the anniversary of the day they first met, Andy expected to find her there and take her home. To his surprise, Tammy wasn't at the bar. Her mother, Mary, told him that Tammy had left hours earlier after complaining of not feeling well. Concerned but not overly alarmed, Andy assumed she might have gone to pick up their son, Casey, from Sharon's house. He drove to Sharon's home, hoping to find her there. At Sharon's, he learned that Tammy hadn't arrived. Sharon mentioned that Tammy had planned to meet her uncle Daniel at the Nikilo Lounge and had said that she wouldn't pick up Casey until after 1 a.m. This news worried both Andy and Sharon. Andy called the Nikilo Lounge, and a staff member there informed him that Tammy and her group had recently left the bar. Relieved, Andy assumed he had simply missed her on the road. He picked up Casey from Sharon and headed back home. When Andy arrived home with Casey, he was surprised to see that Tammy still hadn't returned. Feeling exhausted, he assumed she might have stayed overnight at Daniel's house and decided to go to bed. However, when Andy woke up the next morning, he immediately checked her side of the bed. She still wasn't there. Concern turned to fear as he searched the house and realized she hadn't come home. While it wasn't unusual for Tammy to spend time with her uncle Daniel or her friends, staying out all night without informing anyone was unlike her. Even more troubling, she hadn't returned to pick up their son, something she would never fail to do as a loving and devoted mother. Andy began calling friends and acquaintances, but no one had any idea where Tammy might be. By midday, Andy and a friend went to Nikilo Lounge, hoping to gather information about the previous night. In the bar's parking lot, Andy found Tammy's car. He then contacted Daniel, who recounted the events of the night before and handed over her car keys. Andy was upset to learn that his wife, Tammy, had been driven home by Kenneth, a man he barely knew, but he held his emotions in check while trying to uncover what had happened. He retrieved the car and later tracked down Kenneth's address to confront him, hoping Tammy had simply been too drunk to return home and had stayed at Kenneth's place. When Andy met Kenneth, Kenneth claimed that Tammy had indeed been heavily intoxicated the night before. He said he tried to sober her up with coffee, but it didn't work. Kenneth explained that he had decided to drive her home, but Tammy fell asleep in his car before providing her address. As they neared a railroad crossing, Kenneth said he gently shook her to wake her, but she suddenly panicked, screamed, and jumped out of the car. Kenneth claimed she ran off, and despite his efforts to follow her, he couldn't catch up. According to Kenneth, this happened less than a kilometer from Nikilo Lounge. Frustrated and exhausted from searching, Andy became deeply concerned and decided to report Tammy as missing to the police. He did not believe Kenneth's testimony, was angry with Kenneth, and suspected the man of lying. After leaving the police station, Andy called Kenneth again and warned him that if Tammy wasn't found soon, the police would focus their investigation on him. Kenneth continued to insist that Tammy had run off on her own and that he had no idea where she was. Initially, the police hesitated to act, suggesting Andy should wait at least a day in case Tammy returned on her own. They speculated that she might simply be sleeping off the night at a friend's house. However, after the waiting period had passed, the authorities started actively searching for Tammy. Since Kenneth was the last known person to see Tammy, detectives focused closely on him. They also interviewed other witnesses. Investigators noticed that Kenneth repeatedly told several people the same story about Tammy jumping out of his car on Friday, February 8th. Witnesses found his account unconvincing, leading detectives to suspect he was trying to avoid responsibility and craft an alibi. Kenneth's story wasn't the only red flag, his injuries raised suspicions as well. Andy immediately noticed that Kenneth had fresh scratches on his face and a deep cut on his hand. As detectives compared witness statements, they noticed Kenneth kept modifying his story, seeming to distance himself more and more from Tammy's disappearance. His explanations for the injuries also lacked consistency. He told Andy that he had been drunk and accidentally cut his hand while breaking a window to enter his home, but he later claimed the scratches on his face came from chopping wood at night. The idea of chopping wood in the dark while intoxicated seemed highly improbable to investigators. Frustrated by Kenneth's changing stories, Tammy's family began confronting him. Tammy's brother even threatened Kenneth, saying he would punish him if anything happened to Tammy because of him. Tammy's mother, uncle, and husband also joined in pressuring Kenneth. Observing the rising tensions, law enforcement decided to delve deeper into Kenneth's background. Kenneth Byrose was born on June 24, 1958, and had a challenging childhood. His father was a cruel and controlling man who treated his family like possessions. Both his mother and siblings endured life under this oppressive environment. Despite his mother being faithful, his father was extremely jealous and focused entirely on controlling her, neglecting his parental responsibilities. He often abused her physically and alternated between threatening to harm her and his family. The family's situation only improved after his father passed away from liver disease in October 1983, which finally freed them from his tyranny. Kenneth was described by his family as kind and compassionate. He earned a degree in criminology during college and aspired to succeed in life. However, even as a young man, he had several run-ins with the law. In 1977, he was linked to a high-profile case, but it was dismissed due to a lack of evidence. Later, in 1986, he was caught driving under the influence, pleaded guilty, and received a minor penalty. Despite the significant trauma caused by his father's behavior and death, he appeared outwardly sociable and normal. At the time of Tammy's disappearance, he was living with his mother. On the morning of February 8, 1991, the day after Tammy went missing, Kenneth's mother noticed a gold ring on the bathroom floor. Unfamiliar with it, she questioned Kenneth, as he didn't have a girlfriend at the time. Kenneth simply took the ring, claiming he didn't know where it came from. Initially, his mother didn't think much of it. However, as rumors began spreading in the community about Kenneth's possible involvement in Tammy's disappearance, she began to reconsider the ring's significance. Kenneth later suggested that the ring might belong to Tammy and claimed he would return it to the bar they had visited the previous day. However, it was later revealed that he never followed through. On Saturday morning, February 9th, 1991, Tammy's friends and family began searching for her, focusing on areas Kenneth mentioned. This included a wooded area near some railroad tracks, where she had reportedly run from Kenneth's car. Initially, the search yielded no results. It is worth noting that Kenneth was also involved in this search, with extensive support and organization from law enforcement. During police interviews, Kenneth appeared nervous when questioned about Tammy's disappearance. A police officer and his partner decided to closely monitor Kenneth. They floated several scenarios, including one in which Kenneth made an unwanted advance toward Tammy, causing her to panic and jump out of the moving car. Although Kenneth initially denied this version of events, he later admitted that it had happened that way. This sudden change in his story raised suspicions among investigators. Detectives decided to question Kenneth further. One officer managed to have a one-on-one conversation and succeeded in extracting more information. Kenneth confessed that while driving Tammy home, he placed his hand on her leg. Tammy reacted by pushing his hand away, becoming frightened. According to Kenneth, she opened the car door and jumped out while the car was moving over the railroad tracks. He claimed that she hit her head when she fell, but initially said she ran away afterward. As the detectives pressed him for details, he provided more information and even pinpointed the exact location of the incident, less than a kilometer from his home. The detectives grew increasingly suspicious of Kenneth, so they took him to the police station for further questioning. During questioning, Kenneth began referring to Tammy in the past tense, which led investigators to suspect that she was no longer alive. This raised immediate alarms for the detectives. When Kenneth realized the police believed Tammy was dead and suspected him of involvement, he requested a lawyer. However, he didn't stop speaking completely. Kenneth eventually agreed to guide detectives to locations that he claimed were relevant. He also referred to multiple places during these conversations, suggesting that there might be more than one site of importance. However, the detectives found this strange but did not rush to expand the investigation further from his statement. Early on Sunday, February 10, 1991, the grim reality of Kenneth's words became evident. Police from Pennsylvania and Ohio discovered the dismembered body parts of a young woman in an isolated, wooded area of Butler County, Pennsylvania. The remains were horrifying. Her head and the right side of her torso were found first, along with her right leg, amputated above the knee. Her body was unclothed except for black stockings, which had been pushed down to her ankles. The medical examiner confirmed that her death was brutal. Near the location Kenneth had identified as the place where Tammy jumped out of the car, investigators found a blood-streaked stretch of railroad tracks. Several of Tammy's internal organs and pieces of her clothing were also discovered. This prompted the investigators to search Kenneth's home, where they found a bloody knife hidden in his bathroom, another blood-stained knife in his personal room, and blood-soaked clothing matching descriptions provided by Tammy's uncle, Daniel. The bloody clothing belonged to both Kenneth and Tammy. Further evidence was uncovered in the attic, where investigators found a ring that was confirmed to belong to Tammy, the same one Kenneth's mother had previously found in the bathroom. In Kenneth's vehicle, more remains were discovered, including a piece of Tammy's liver in the car trunk. The medical examiner determined that Tammy had been strangled, as her hyoid bone was fractured, and she had been stabbed 5 times. After her death, her body sustained 91 additional injuries, confirming that her death was deliberate and not accidental. Confronted with this overwhelming evidence, Kenneth confessed to the murder. However, his story shifted repeatedly. As the trial approached, Kenneth's lawyer sought to reduce his responsibility. He argued that Kenneth's abusive father had negatively impacted his mental health. Kenneth faced charges of abuse, first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, and first-degree robbery. His defense included an insanity plea supported by a psychiatric evaluation, which diagnosed him with schizoid personality disorder, neurotic depression, and alcohol addiction. The defense cited these factors, along with Kenneth's lack of serious prior convictions, as mitigating circumstances. Throughout his life, Kenneth had been described as a hard-working, modest man, not someone capable of such atrocities. However, this narrative failed to convince anyone. Psychiatrists working with law enforcement found Kenneth sane, fit to stand trial, and fully aware of his actions. The defense then shifted its strategy, claiming that Tammy's death was accidental and that Kenneth had panicked and tried to cover it up. The prosecution countered, pointing to his changing stories as evidence of deceit. They claimed that Tammy's death was a deliberate and premeditated act of murder, intended to cover up evidence of abuse. The defense presented Kenneth's latest version of events. He claimed that Tammy had been heavily intoxicated and unable to give her home address, so he had taken her to his residence to let her sleep it off. At a railroad crossing, Kenneth said he tried to wake her, but she panicked, started screaming, and fell out of the car, hitting her head. According to Kenneth, the head injury made her agitated, and when he tried to help, she became violent, screaming, throwing stones, and scratching him. Fearing legal trouble, Kenneth claimed he panicked, subdued her, and later attempted to dispose of the evidence. Kenneth claimed that he pulled out a knife to intimidate Tammy and stop her from screaming. Instead of calming down, she allegedly resisted even more. During the struggle, Kenneth stated that he accidentally cut his hand and lost control of his emotions. He admitted to hitting Tammy, knocking her to the ground, and covering her mouth with his hand to silence her. According to him, he pressed his hand over her mouth for several minutes and only realized she had died when he calmed down and removed his hand. Panicked, he decided to dispose of her body. However, forensic evidence contradicted Kenneth's account. Experts determined that Tammy's broken hyoid bone was not caused by covering her mouth but by deliberate force applied to her throat. Furthermore, Kenneth's explanation failed to account for the 91 injuries found on Tammy's body, many of which were inflicted after her death. The evidence led prosecutors to accuse Kenneth of committing an intentional and exceptionally cruel murder. They described him as a sadistic individual who tortured Tammy and continued to harm her body even after her death. After the murder, Kenneth reportedly brought Tammy's body home, intending to bury it. However, due to the frozen winter ground, he struggled to dig a grave. To make it easier to transport, he divided her body into several parts. During this process, Tammy's ring fell in the bathroom, where it was later discovered by Kenneth's mother. He confessed to dragging Tammy's remains into a nearby forest, where he attempted to bury the parts in shallow pits. When the pits were too small for the larger body parts, he hid the bodies in separate pits overnight. When Tammy's family began to pressure and threaten Kenneth, he exhumed her body and moved it to a location several kilometers away in Pennsylvania for better concealment. Throughout the investigation and trial, Kenneth's account kept changing. Prosecutors, supported by Tammy's relatives, argued that Tammy had been tortured, abused, and murdered in a premeditated and extremely cruel manner. The jury sided with the prosecution, convicting Kenneth Byrose and sentencing him to death. While awaiting his sentence, Kenneth's inconsistent stories and denials failed to sway public opinion or the jury's decision. While in prison, Kenneth faced multiple disciplinary actions. In May 1992, he was caught with a cardboard tube that could be used as a makeshift gun and 3 darts made from toilet paper and metal staples, resulting in 10 days of disciplinary confinement. A month later, authorities discovered a knife crafted from a piece of an antenna in his possession. In October 1995, a search of his cell uncovered 12 packs of contraband cigarettes and other prohibited items. Despite these infractions, Kenneth and his lawyers pursued appeals in an effort to avoid his execution. On July 9, 2005, at the age of 45, Tammy's widower, Andy Engstrom, died from a heart attack. Those close to him said he never recovered from the loss of his wife. During this time, Kenneth remained in prison, working as a food delivery worker on death row and participating in church services and community programs. Many believed he became more religious and reformed during this period. On October 22, 2009, a trial took place. In an interview with journalists, Kenneth continued to insist that Tammy's death was an accident. He maintained his innocence and argued that he did not deserve the death penalty. Kenneth expressed hope that his sentence might be reduced to life imprisonment without parole, sparing his life. However, those who loved Tammy, especially her mother, Mary Jane, and her son, Casey, strongly disagreed. They firmly believed that Kenneth's crime could only be justly punished with the death penalty. Efforts to secure a retrial failed, and on December 8, 2009, at around noon, 51 years old Kenneth Byros was executed. His final meal the night before consisted of cheese pizza, onion rings, fried mushrooms, chips with French onion dip, cherry pie, blueberry ice cream, and Dr. Pepper. On the day of his execution, he drank only a glass of water, expressed regret for the murder, and thanked those who had prayed for him. Execution, carried out at the South Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, was the first in the state to use a single powerful anesthetic drug, which replaced the previous 3-drug protocol. Although Kenneth's lawyer objected to what he called an experimental procedure, the execution was declared a success, as it was carried out smoothly and Kenneth died within 10 minutes. Tammy Engstrom's mother, Mary Jane, attended the execution despite her advanced age and poor health. Using a wheelchair and an oxygen tank, she arrived at the event in severe pain but later told reporters that she felt a sense of relief and justice. Just 12 days afterward, Mary Jane passed away. Over time, local rumors began to spread about the house where Kenneth had lived with his mother. People claimed it was haunted by ghosts. Eventually, the house caught fire and was completely destroyed, yet the stories persisted. Some locals insisted that restless spirits lingered at the site where the house once stood. Over the years, this tragic tale became part of local urban legends. Sherabin K. was born on April 30, 1999, in a small village in Iraq, into a traditional and simple family. When she was 6 years old, her family relocated to Germany and settled in Ingolstadt, where she eventually began school. Her parents, deeply religious and conservative, tried their best to instill traditional values in her. However, she grew up in a different environment and quickly adapted to the culture and lifestyle of her new home. From a young age, Sherabin demonstrated a strong, independent personality and was not afraid to challenge authority or go against traditional expectations. She aspired to live freely, embracing a modern, progressive way of life. While still in school, she dreamed of pursuing a career in the beauty industry as a stylist and beauty influencer. She spent hours watching makeup tutorials online and used her allowance to purchase cosmetics, convinced she would someday own a beauty studio or even launch her own cosmetics brand. However, Sherabin's determination often came with emotional outbursts, manipulative behavior, and attempts to gain sympathy in order to achieve her goals. By the age of 15, she began a secret relationship with Juan, a 17-year-old boy of Iraqi descent who also grew up in Germany. Aware that their families would not approve, they kept their relationship hidden, meeting discreetly around town. Their secret was revealed when Sherabin's cousin saw them together. Instead of informing her parents, the cousin attempted to blackmail her with inappropriate demands. Sherabin refused and ultimately decided to tell her parents the truth about both her relationship and the blackmail attempt. Though shocked, her parents could no longer be manipulated by the cousin, and Sherabin took control of the situation. Despite her parents' disapproval and orders to end the relationship, she continued to see Juan in secret. Family tensions escalated, but Sherabin held her ground. When she turned 18, she and Juan got married, making their relationship official. Following the marriage, she cut off contact with her parents for over a year. Both Sherabin and Juan were ambitious and worked hard to build a better future. Together, they opened a small hair salon where Sherabin worked as a makeup artist and skincare specialist. Their business prospered, providing a stable income and bringing them closer to their dreams. At first, their future seemed promising. Yet the happiness in their marriage was short-lived. Sherabin's jealous, hot-tempered and emotionally volatile personality quickly ruined their relationship. Private arguments turned into public confrontations, and her behavior began to negatively impact their marriage. Her jealousy was extreme, making her suspicious of nearly every woman who interacted with Juan. Her emotions often boiled over, leading to conflicts even with clients at their salon, which began to harm their business. The tension between them escalated, and their marriage became fraught with constant conflict. One day, at a cafe where they often ate lunch, Sharaban lost her temper during an argument with Ruan, throwing objects in frustration. One of the objects, a dessert, landed on a nearby table of other patrons. The incident resulted in them being banned from the cafe and quickly became a topic of discussion in the community. Despite mounting criticism and damage to their reputation, Sharaban's behavior only worsened. Their arguments eventually turned physical, with Ruan often bearing the brunt of Sharaban's aggression but choosing not to retaliate. Despite the relentless turmoil, neither of them brought up the idea of divorce. Remarkably, it seemed as though both had accepted the toxic cycle their marriage had become. In 2020, Sharaban and Ruan were confined to close quarters due to unforeseen circumstances, which strangely led to a temporary reconciliation. They managed to rebuild some semblance of connection, and by the following year, they approached their shared business with renewed enthusiasm. Things seemed to be improving. By 2021, Sharaban rewarded herself with a sleek black Mercedes-Benz. Having her own car gave Sharaban a new sense of independence. She no longer had to justify her comings and goings to anyone. Her confidence grew, bordering on defiance. She began going out frequently, visiting nightclubs, and socializing with new people, especially men. These encounters were usually short-lived, casual flings or brief dating experiences. However, one of them evolved into something deeper when Sharaban met a man named Jacob. What began as a casual relationship quickly turned into a passionate love affair. Despite openly pursuing Jacob, Sharaban continued to monitor Ruan's behavior, checking his phone, accusing him of cheating, and even following him. Her bond with Jacob grew deeper, and for a time, she seriously contemplated leaving Ruan for him. Then, Sharaban discovered she was pregnant. Certain about who the father was, she immediately told Ruan about the pregnancy and announced she was leaving him for her new partner, Jacob. The news devastated Ruan. He understood their marriage was beyond repair, but the humiliation took a heavy toll on him. Meanwhile, Sharaban's life took an unexpected turn when Jacob revealed that he wasn't ready for fatherhood and was not interested in marriage. Emotionally overwhelmed, Sharaban found herself isolated. At this point, Ruan's family intervened. Sensing an opportunity, they pressured Sharaban to terminate the pregnancy. Reluctantly, she complied, but the experience deepened her resentment, not only toward Ruan but also toward his family, whom she held responsible for forcing her decision. Even though their relationship was clearly broken, neither Sharaban nor Ruan made their separation official. They continued living under the same roof in a tense and toxic environment. Eventually, things escalated. One day, overcome with rage, Sharaban stormed into Ruan's brother's house and attacked both him and his wife with a stun device, terrifying their children. This marked a serious turning point. After several more violent incidents, Ruan decided to take legal action. He filed for divorce and secured a court order banning Sharaban from approaching him or his family. However, there was still the matter of the business they had built together, a salon legally registered in Ruan's name. Determined not to lose the salon, Ruan took control of it, effectively cutting Sharaban off from the venture. The court would ultimately determine its future. Most of Ruan's family and friends supported him, leaving Sharaban isolated and embittered. She moved into a rented apartment, withdrew socially, and began plotting revenge. She devised a chilling plan to fake her own death and frame Ruan for the crime. If successful, he would go to prison, allowing her to disappear and start over. The plan required finding someone who resembled her, a young woman who could pass as her double. She approached her scheme with disturbing determination. She turned to social media, meticulously analyzing profiles, studying photos, and shortlisting potential victims. Eventually, she found someone who matched her criteria, a 23-year-old waitress named Khadija. Through social media, Sharaban discovered that Khadija had grown up in foster care, meaning she had no close family who might quickly raise concerns. Like Sharaban, Khadija was originally from Pakistan. She had moved to Germany as a child with her father, who was later imprisoned, leaving her to grow up in a group home. Despite the challenges of growing up alone in a foreign country, Khadija remained hopeful and outgoing. She dreamed of pursuing a career in the entertainment industry, whether on television or in film. She regularly attended auditions, casting calls, and talent competitions. To Sharaban, this determination presented the perfect opportunity to execute her plan. After carefully analyzing every detail, Sharaban concluded that Khadija was the ideal target. They had similar physical features, comparable height, build, facial structure, and even a strikingly similar sense of fashion. They looked so alike that they could easily have been mistaken for sisters. In April 2022, Sharaban created a fake account on a popular social media platform, pretending to be a talent scout. She meticulously crafted the profile to appear authentic, gaining followers and frequently posting about casting calls and auditions. By mid-June, she contacted Khadija under the guise of working as a casting director for a well-known German rap artist. She messaged Khadija, claiming that Khadija had been selected for a music video audition. Khadija was ecstatic and immediately agreed, convinced it might be her big break. A fan of the artist, she decided to message him directly to share her excitement and inquire about further details. To her surprise, she discovered that no such project existed and that there had been no casting call. Realizing she had been deceived, but unsure of the perpetrator's identity or motives, Khadija blocked the fake account. This left Sharaban scrambling to devise a new, foolproof plan. Over the following 2 months, Sharaban developed another fake identity. This time, she posed as the owner of a new beauty salon and reached out to Khadija with an offer of free beauty treatments as part of a promotional campaign for the salon's grand opening. In exchange, Sharaban only requested permission to take photos and videos of the process. Seeing nothing suspicious about the offer, Khadija happily accepted. There was, however, a slight inconvenience for Khadija. The salon was located across town, making transportation difficult. Sharaban offered to personally pick her up and drop her off afterward. Leaving no stone unturned, Sharaban kept a close eye on Khadija's social media and even copied her hairstyle. Sharaban subtly changed her hair color to match Khadija's perfectly. By the time the meeting day arrived, their appearances were nearly indistinguishable. Sharaban took additional precautions to ensure her plan's success. About a month before the meeting, she moved back in with her parents, pretending to reconcile and seek forgiveness. Her parents, believing her intentions were genuine, welcomed her back. In Sharaban's twisted plot, her parents were meant to discover a body and mistakenly identify it as hers. The meeting with Khadija was scheduled for the evening of August 16, 2022. Sharaban asked Khadija to wear a dark blue dress similar to one she had previously worn in a social media photo. Sharaban had already purchased an identical dress for herself and deliberately wore it repeatedly in front of her parents earlier that day, ensuring they would clearly remember what she had on before leaving. She informed her family she was going to meet Juan to resolve private business matters and mentioned feeling anxious about how the conversation might go. Before leaving, she promised to return that evening and asked them to wish her luck. At 5 p.m., Sharaban drove off in her black Mercedes. When her mother later tried calling her, the phone went straight to voicemail. Initially, her family wasn't overly concerned, but as time passed without any word from her, their worry grew. By nightfall, they could no longer sit idle. They decided to search for her and headed toward Ruan's neighborhood. Along the way, they came across Sharaban's abandoned black Mercedes on the roadside. It was unmistakably hers, and they knew she would never leave her car unattended like that. They immediately knew something was gravely wrong. The car's tinted windows made it hard to see inside in the dark, but through the windshield, they could make out a figure lying still in the back seat. They tried to open the doors but found them locked. In a panic, they called the police and emergency medical services. When officers arrived and unlocked the vehicle, they made a horrifying discovery: the lifeless body of a young woman lying in the back seat in a pool of blood. A subsequent forensic examination revealed over 50 stab wounds concentrated on her face, neck, and chest. The attack was clearly a deliberate and extremely cruel act, intended to ensure that the victim would not survive. Although the victim's face was so disfigured it was unrecognizable, Sharaban's parents identified the body as their daughter. She was wearing the same dark blue dress she had left home in, her purse containing her ID was nearby, and her bracelet was still on her wrist. News of the gruesome crime spread quickly, especially since the car had been found near the area where Sheriban once lived with her ex-husband, Juan. Naturally, he became the prime suspect. Sheriban's parents informed the police that she had left to meet Juan for a business-related discussion but had never returned. Now her car had been found with a body inside. Police acted quickly to question Juan, but by the time they arrived at his home, he had disappeared. Aware of the situation and how it could incriminate him, he fled, which only fueled suspicions further. His relationship with Sheriban had ended badly, with a bitter business dispute, and there was no love left between them. He had both motive and reason to flee. However, the case remained suspicious. Although the victim was identified by her parents and found in Sheriban's car, dressed and carrying identification, her face was severely disfigured in what appeared to be a deliberate act. This appeared to be intended to prevent a positive identification. Then, a surprising twist emerged. The day after the body was discovered, a woman named Samira filed a missing person report for her friend and coworker, Khadija. Khadija hadn't shown up to work, wasn't answering her phone, and hadn't been seen since the evening before. During their investigation, authorities noticed that Khadija bore a striking resemblance to Sheriban. DNA analysis confirmed their suspicions. The body in the car was not Sheriban but Khadija. This discovery completely changed the direction of the case. Adding to the revelation, evidence emerged that someone had recently attempted to hire an attacker online, offering €30,000 for the job. This lead pointed directly to Sheriban and her new boyfriend, Shakir. Initially, they had sought to hire someone to carry out their plan but eventually decided to execute it themselves. Their scheme revolved around staging a brutal murder in order to frame Juan and send him to prison. However, their actions soon revealed how poorly they had thought through their plan. Sheriban and Shakir's reckless behavior astonished investigators. Despite faking her own death, Sheriban made no effort to hide. She and Shakir continued living their lives as if nothing had happened, staying in the same city where they were well known. This decision proved disastrous. Sheriban was arrested just 2 days after the crime when she casually walked into a cafe. Several customers immediately recognized her and alerted the police. When officers arrived and detained her, she quickly disclosed Shakir's location, attempting to shift all the blame onto him. Sheriban and Shakir, who had initially plotted the crime together, quickly turned on each other. Investigators noted glaring flaws in their plan, particularly regarding what they intended to do after the framing succeeded. If Sheriban had been declared dead and Juan imprisoned, what was her next move? Was she planning to continue living in the same town where people could easily recognize her? How would she obtain new identification? With the case gaining national media attention, it would have been nearly impossible for her to disappear anywhere within Germany or elsewhere in Europe. Their financial situation was no better. The only money they had was a small amount Sheriban withdrew from her bank account before carrying out the crime. They left the car with Khadija's body inside, believing it would make their plan more convincing. However, they failed to anticipate a key problem. Once Sheriban was legally declared dead, she would lose all legal claims to the business she shared with Juan. Furthermore, investigators had access to tools like DNA testing, dental records, and fingerprints to confirm the identity of a victim, making their deception easy to uncover. Once taken into custody, the relationship between Sheriban and Shakir quickly unraveled. The love that had once bonded the two was gone. Now, it was every person for themselves. Shakir claimed that Sheriban had masterminded everything, planning every detail and carrying it out on her own. He maintained that his sole role was helping her disappear afterward. However, Sheriban's account painted a very different picture. According to her, it was Shakir who had decided to go through with the act, while she had backed out at the last minute. Right on schedule, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz pulled up in front of the building where Khadija lived. Sheriban introduced herself as the salon owner, while Shakir played the part of her personal driver. Khadija felt uneasy, even startled, by how much she and Sheriban looked alike. They weren't just similar, they looked like twins and were dressed almost identically. Sensing her discomfort, Sheriban quickly brushed it off, claiming it was part of a branding strategy for an upcoming salon promotion. Once the three of them were in the car, Sharaban acted as though they were running late and insisted on taking a shortcut. Shakir drove them off the main road into a deserted, undeveloped area. There, he suddenly claimed they had a flat tire and needed to get out of the car so he could fix it. The moment Khadija stepped out, he attacked her, using a knife to strike repeatedly in the chest, face, and neck. He didn't stop until her face was unrecognizable. After the attack, Shakir placed the body in the back seat, changed into a clean set of clothes he had brought along, and got back into the driver's seat. Thanks to the car's tinted windows, it was nearly impossible for anyone to see inside, so they weren't worried about being noticed. They drove to an area near Ruan's home, parked the car casually along the roadside, and walked away, unconcerned about being seen or recognized. They checked into a hotel in another part of the city and carried on as if nothing had happened, frequenting public places and maintaining their usual routine. The trial that followed would shock the country. After the crime came to light, Juan went into hiding. He remained off the radar for over a year as the investigation unfolded. Eventually, he explained that even after authorities cleared him of suspicion, he feared Sharaban, despite being behind bars, would find a way to retaliate against him. As it turns out, he had good reason to be afraid. While in custody, both Sharaban and Shakir allegedly attempted to arrange further attacks by hiring others through prison contacts, hoping to silence potential witnesses. Thankfully, none of those attempts succeeded. During the trial, Sharaban and Shakir turned on each other. Each claimed the other was the mastermind, and neither showed any remorse for what had happened. One witness, a man named Alan, testified that he had initially responded to an online ad offering payment for an attack. After receiving a €5,000 advance, he simply took the money and disappeared. It was reportedly after this scam that Sharaban and Shakir decided to carry out the crime themselves. Fearing the police might track him down and implicate him, Alan voluntarily went to the authorities and confessed everything. Throughout the case, investigators were baffled by the complete lack of logic behind the plan. It was clear that Sharaban's primary motive was revenge against Juan, but no one could understand what she thought would happen afterward. After staging such a violent crime and faking her own death, she made no effort to hide. She stayed in the same city, carried on with her usual life, and had no long-term plan for survival or escape. She hadn't even considered how she would support herself financially moving forward. Sharaban's defense attorneys leaned heavily on the flaws in her plan, arguing that her intentions were confused, her motivation weak, and that she would never have followed through without Shakir's influence. They claimed it was he who had taken matters into his own hands, lured by the prospect of financial gain. But the court didn't buy it. In December 2024, both Sharaban and Shakir were found guilty of a brutal, premeditated crime committed in coordination with one another. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Beverly Carter was born in 1963 in Anniston, Alabama. By the age of 16, she was already working as a waitress, brimming with ambition and eager to create a better future for herself. During this time, she met Carl Carter, who was 3 years older than her. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon married. However, their early years as newlyweds were turbulent. One alarming incident occurred when Carl, driving under the influence with Beverly as a passenger, became violent after she asked him to pull over due to his reckless driving. Despite the dangerous situation, she chose to stay with him. Not long after, she discovered Carl had been unfaithful. Though deeply hurt by the betrayal, she decided to give him another chance, believing in forgiveness. Over time, their relationship began to mend. They eventually moved to Scott, Arkansas, a quiet rural town that allowed them to put down roots. They went on to have 3 sons, and Beverly wholeheartedly embraced motherhood, pouring her energy into creating a warm, stable home for her family. As her children grew older and more independent, Beverly felt the need to pursue her own ambitions. She began working as a receptionist, a role that served as a stepping stone before discovering her passion for real estate. She enthusiastically studied for her license and, once certified, found her calling as a real estate agent. Beverly excelled in her career, earning a reputation for her warmth, honesty, and tireless work ethic. Her clients adored her, and her job not only brought her fulfillment but also provided financial security for her family. They were not wealthy, but the weight of financial struggles eased significantly. By their 20th wedding anniversary, Carl and Beverly decided to celebrate in a meaningful way. They renewed their vows and hosted the celebration they had once dreamed of but couldn't afford as newlyweds. It was a joyous milestone and a testament to their perseverance as a couple. But their journey was not all happy moments. In 2003, the family faced an unimaginable tragedy when their 19-year-old son, Christopher, died in a car accident. Christopher was married with children, and his sudden death left a void in their lives that could not be filled. Beverly was deeply saddened, but to cope, she poured herself into her work. She also found comfort in her grandchildren, whose presence helped heal her heart. Despite her grief, she remained a loving mother and grandmother, and it was her strength that helped the family overcome this loss. On September 25, 2014, Beverly's day began on a positive note. She won a friendly office contest with a $5,000 prize and was in high spirits. That evening, she had one last appointment scheduled, showing a house in Scott to prospective buyers. The clients claimed they were ready to pay in cash, promising a smooth transaction. Energized and optimistic, Beverly left her office at 5:30 p.m., calling Carl on her way to let him know about the appointment. She shared the address and promised to bring dinner home afterward. Everything seemed normal until hours later. By 9 p.m., Beverly still hadn't returned home. Carl grew increasingly anxious as his calls to her went unanswered. One of their sons decided to check her office for any sign of her, while Carl drove to the property in Scott, the last place she was known to be. When Carl arrived, he was met with a disturbing sight. Beverly's car was still in the driveway, and her purse was openly sitting on the passenger seat. This immediately alarmed him. Like many real estate agents, Beverly followed strict safety protocols and never brought personal belongings into unfamiliar homes. With growing concern, Carl approached the house. The front door was wide open. As he stepped inside, the house was eerily silent. He called out her name, but there was no response. She was nowhere to be found. Carl quickly phoned his son, only to learn that there was no sign of her at the office either. The office was locked up for the night and empty. At that moment, Carl knew it was time to contact the police. When officers arrived, they meticulously examined the scene. However, there was a complication. Carl had entered the house before their arrival, leaving his fingerprints and potentially disturbing evidence in what now appeared to be a crime scene. During questioning, Carl was transparent. He openly discussed his past, including mistakes he had made early in their marriage, his infidelity, and a single incident of physical aggression. However, he emphasized that those events were far behind him. Carl spoke with raw emotion about his love for Beverly and his commitment to their life together. His candidness and visible distress led investigators to believe he was not the suspect they were looking for. At approximately 1 a.m., Carl received a strange text from Beverly's phone. The message said she went out drinking with friends, but that didn't seem right. The tone and wording were completely uncharacteristic of Beverly, and most importantly, she never drank. Carl wasn't the only one receiving peculiar messages. Earlier, as part of the search, Carl had reached out to two of Beverly's colleagues for help. Both women also texted Beverly and received responses that felt off. One colleague, suspicious that something was wrong, sent a coded message, a silent distress signal the team used in emergencies. She simply asked if Beverly had left a red folder on her desk, essentially inquiring whether she was in danger. However, there was no reply. By morning, Beverly Carter's disappearance had become widely known. Police began canvassing the neighborhood near the house where she had vanished. A neighbor reported seeing a suspicious man the previous evening, a tall, thin white man with short, dark hair. He was seen exiting a black car parked not in the driveway, but directly on the vacant home's front lawn. Investigators examined the area and found fresh tire marks on the grass, supporting the neighbor's account. It was their first real lead. Attention then turned to Beverly's work computer. A colleague, familiar with her login credentials, assisted officers in accessing her records. They quickly uncovered details of her last appointment, a meeting with prospective buyers named Steve and Crystal Adams. Their contact information, including a phone number and email, had been logged. However, further investigation revealed these names were fictitious. The email address was fake, and the phone number was tied to an anonymous communication service rather than a personal line. By contacting the service provider, police traced the messages to a man named Aaron Lewis, a 33 years old living in Jacksonville, just 15 miles away. They opted for surveillance rather than immediate action, wanting to confirm whether Aaron matched the neighbor's description, and more importantly, whether he could lead them to Beverly's whereabouts. The surveillance paid off quickly. A tall, lean man with short, dark hair exited the house and got into a black Ford Fusion, fitting the neighbor's description exactly. Undercover officers in an unmarked car began tailing him. Sensing he was being followed, Aaron attempted to escape, speeding away in an effort to lose them. The chase was short-lived. Driving recklessly, he lost control of the car and crashed into a ditch. The collision was severe. Not wearing a seatbelt, Aaron hit his head on the steering wheel and sustained facial injuries. He was extracted from the wreck and taken to the hospital for medical treatment. Initially, authorities had no formal reason to arrest Aaron Lewis. Without a warrant, their actions were limited to surveillance, observing him discreetly, gathering evidence, and avoiding direct engagement. However, everything changed after his failed escape and subsequent hospitalization. Following treatment for his facial injuries and in magnetic resonance imaging, Aaron made a bold move. While momentarily unsupervised at the hospital, he slipped away unnoticed and vanished before law enforcement could intervene. Just like that, Aaron, the prime suspect in Beverly's case, has escaped. A massive manhunt was launched shortly thereafter. Local television stations aired images of him from the scene of the crash, helping residents of the Little Rock and Scott areas quickly identify him. It didn't take long for him to be identified. Two office workers discussing the case noticed a man at a bus stop who strongly resembled the fugitive. One of them approached him under the guise of asking about bus schedules to get a closer look at his face. There was no doubt, it was Aaron Lewis. While one worker discreetly called the police, Aaron wandered away, unaware that he'd been recognized. Driven by hunger, he stopped at a Subway sandwich shop, but his low profile didn't last long. Several customers immediately recognized him. Unlike the office workers, these bystanders did not stay quiet. They pointed at him, shouted, and created a commotion. Realizing he'd been found, Aaron fled, sprinting out of the shop and ducking into a nearby building to hide. It was too late. Within minutes, police closed in on the area and arrested him without resistance. After his arrest, Aaron began to offer a defense. He denied any involvement in Beverly's disappearance and initially claimed he hadn't gone to her house alone. According to him, a friend had accompanied him, and at some point, he had stepped outside, leaving Beverly and his friend alone inside. He insisted that whatever happened to her must have occurred after he left. Investigators quickly debunked this story. The supposed accomplice was a soldier stationed far away at the time of Beverly's disappearance, and his alibi was airtight. Witness testimonies and phone records confirmed he hadn't left his post. Having been caught in a lie, Aaron refused to provide the truth. Detectives shifted their approach, pressing him for details about Beverly's location, as they still hoped she might be alive. Aaron remained vague, even cryptic. He hinted that she could survive if found quickly, but warned that she hadn't had food or water since his arrest, suggesting time was running out. Under mounting pressure, Aaron offered to guide investigators to two locations where he claimed Beverly had been kept. Both buildings were thoroughly searched, but she wasn't there. Aaron changed his story yet again, insisting that someone else, an accomplice, must have moved her. Because his testimony was unreliable, investigators turned to his call history for answers. The phone records traced his movements on the day Beverly disappeared, leading them to an abandoned concrete plant about 25 miles from Scott where Aaron had previously worked. It was a desolate and grim place. Officers began their search with heavy hearts, fearing the worst. On September 30th, their fears were confirmed. In a shallow grave covered with loose dirt, Beverly's body was discovered. The grave had been poorly concealed. One of her elbows was still visible above the soil. The burial had been hasty, and the scene was haunting. Forensic analysts uncovered duct tape wrapped layer upon layer over her head. She had died from suffocation. She had been wrapped so tightly, she couldn't breathe. When police confronted Aaron with the discovery of Beverly's body, he changed his story again. This time, he claimed he and Beverly had been having an affair after meeting through Craigslist. He alleged they had arranged a private meeting on the day of her death, but a tragic accident had occurred during intimacy. This version was even less believable than the others. Beverly's family and friends knew her as a professional, a devoted wife, and a woman of integrity. There was no evidence to suggest an affair. Moreover, the circumstances surrounding her death, the duct tape mask and the shallow grave, pointed to a far more sinister truth than Aaron's claims of an accidental death. Aaron kept changing his story, shifting the blame each time. Eventually, he claimed he wasn't responsible at all, pointing the finger at his wife, Crystal Lowry. He alleged that Crystal had met with Beverly, and something had gone wrong. While detectives were skeptical, they decided to investigate Crystal more closely. Crystal's phone records raised several red flags. On the day Beverly disappeared, Aaron had an unusually high number of contacts with Crystal. While this alone didn't confirm her involvement, it raised suspicions. About a month after Beverly's disappearance, police arrested Crystal. Once in custody, she broke down and confessed everything. Crystal, then 42, revealed disturbing details about her troubled marriage. Though she and Aaron were still legally married, their relationship had completely fallen apart. They shared a home only because they couldn't afford to separate. Mounting financial stress created unbearable tension, and both were desperate for a way out, but they needed money to make it happen. That's when Aaron devised a horrifying plan: kidnap someone wealthy and demand a ransom. Crystal was hesitant but didn't refuse outright. Aaron suggested targeting a female real estate agent, as they tend to work independently, dress well, drive expensive cars, and appear wealthy. After searching online, they selected Beverly Carter, one of the most successful agents in the area. To Aaron, Beverly seemed like the perfect target. Pretending to be a buyer relocating from out of state with his wife, he called her under a fake name. He told her they were looking for a quiet home near Little Rock. To make it even easier to execute his plan, he picked a listing in a secluded area. At first, Beverly refused the request to take Aaron to see the house, citing her company's policy prohibiting private house viewings with men in remote locations. However, Aaron wouldn't give up. He brought Crystal into the scheme, and Crystal called Beverly, assuring her she would attend the showing as well. Reassured, Beverly agreed to meet with them. To further convince her, Aaron claimed they were ready to pay in cash. When the day came, only Aaron showed up. He apologized and explained that his wife, Crystal, had been delayed. Maintaining her professionalism, Beverly allowed the showing to proceed. Tragically, this would be the last house she ever entered. The two toured the property together, beginning on the ground floor. But as they moved upstairs, Aaron made his move. In an instant, he attacked Beverly. Already weakened from recent surgeries, including a tummy tuck, she struggled to fight back. Overpowering her, Aaron bound her hands with duct tape. Despite her resistance, he forced her into the trunk of his car. His plan was to demand a $100,000 ransom in exchange for her life. He intended to hide her at an abandoned building he once worked at, located 25 miles outside Scott. However, when Aaron arrived, he realized the building was neither abandoned nor suitable for holding someone captive. He had no backup plan. With a terrified woman locked in his trunk and nowhere to take her, he panicked. Desperate, he reached out to the only person who knew about the plan, Crystal. He snapped a photo of Beverly, bound and frightened in the trunk, and sent it to Crystal with a single word: help. Crystal was infuriated. She hadn't agreed to Aaron bringing Beverly into their home. By the time she returned from work, however, it was too late. Beverly was already there, locked in their bathroom. In a state of panic, she and Aaron scrambled to figure out their next move. Aaron had already recorded a message on his phone that Crystal was supposed to send to Beverly's husband, Carl. The message was crafted to make it sound like Beverly was being coerced, begging Carl not to call the police and to comply with the kidnapper's ransom demands. But the message was never sent. It remained on Aaron's phone, another critical piece of evidence. The original plan was for Carl to transfer the ransom money to Beverly's bank account. Crystal and Aaron would then withdraw the funds using her debit cards. Aaron even claimed to have obtained her PIN numbers. However, there was a flaw in his plan. Beverly's debit cards were still in her purse, which he had left behind in her car during the abduction. Realizing his mistake, Aaron returned to the scene to retrieve the cards, hoping no one would notice. But by then, police were already searching the area. In an eerie twist of fate, an officer stopped Aaron as he drove by, mistaking him for a neighbor. The officer casually asked if he'd seen anything unusual. Playing it cool, Aaron gave nothing away and calmly drove off. Back at home, things spiraled even further out of control. Crystal anticipated a new danger. Beverly had seen Aaron's face, and while locked in their bathroom, she had noticed prescription pill bottles with Crystal's name clearly visible. If Beverly survived, she could identify them both. Letting her go was no longer an option. Unwilling to handle the situation herself, Crystal told Aaron that Beverly needed to be dealt with. On a dark, fateful drive, Aaron took Beverly from their home to a cement plant. With chilling resolve, he wrapped duct tape around her head repeatedly until she suffocated. After her death, he buried her in a shallow grave. Crystal Lowry eventually confessed, avoiding a lengthy trial. She pled guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison for her involvement. Aaron, however, refused to admit guilt. When his trial began in 2016, Crystal testified against him, but he continued to deny everything. He insisted he had no role in Beverly's murder and only helped cover it up, claiming that Crystal acted alone. The case took a bizarre turn when Aaron alleged that the recording of Beverly's voice was computer-generated, though he couldn't identify any software used to create it. He further argued that the duct tape mask was intended to protect her face from insects during burial. The jury saw through his lies, and after just 4 days of testimony, they found him guilty. Aaron Lewis was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The story didn't end there. In 2020, Crystal requested early release, claiming she had embraced religion in prison and no longer posed a threat. She expressed a desire to repay her debt to society through volunteer work as a free woman. However, the court denied her request. Crystal remains in prison, serving her full 30-year sentence for her role in the calculated murder of Beverly Carter. Beverly, a devoted mother and wife who worked hard and loved deeply, had only wanted to make it home that night. Instead, her life was stolen by 2 people who saw her as nothing more than a source of money, leaving her family shattered forever. Soldiers, rescuers, police officers, and security guards often make us feel safe. However, sometimes someone in uniform is actually a criminal. The term werewolves or epaulets refers to law enforcement officers who abuse their power and commit crimes. Edwin Lara was one such werewolf. Bend, Oregon, a city at the base of the Cascade Mountains, was once a logging town. It is a popular tourist spot, and its population has more than doubled in the last 25 years. Bend attracts people with its sunny weather, outdoor activities like hiking, skiing, fishing, and cycling, and its many breweries. It's known as a friendly and peaceful town with a low crime rate. FBI data shows that Bend has averaged only about 1 murder or manslaughter per year since 1985. This makes the events that took place in the summer of 2016 all the more shocking to the local community. The horrific incident that occurred seemed unimaginable in such a tranquil place. Edwin Lara was born in Honduras in 1985. At age 7, he immigrated to the United States with his family and grew up in Bend, Oregon. Raised by his mother and stepfather, Edwin had a typical childhood, though he never knew his biological father. He was a calm, friendly, and sociable boy who always had many friends. Edwin was never aggressive, didn't get into trouble, and had a good relationship with his parents. However, his life later took a turn for the worse. He dropped out of school, began using banned substance and alcohol. Eventually, he overcame these problems and turned his life around. When Edwin was 20, he met and quickly fell in love with Isabel Ponce, whom he soon proposed to. Their marriage started off wonderfully. They had a strong relationship, went to church together every weekend. Edwin seemed like a loving and devoted husband. However, he harbored a dark ambition. He wanted to become a police officer, but not to serve the community. He was driven by a desire for power and control. Coincidentally, Isabel also aspired to be a police officer, though their reasons for wanting the job were different. After getting married, they both attended Central Oregon Community College. There, they studied criminal justice to gain the qualifications required to become police officers. It was during his college years that Edwin's personality completely changed. From a sociable guy, he suddenly became very withdrawn and fell out with almost all his friends. The once well-mannered young man turned into a rude, aggressive individual. Edwin's fascination with serial killers significantly altered his character. During college, he studied various crimes and became obsessed with famous serial killers, even admiring their actions. He viewed them as heroes who possessed ultimate power over life and death. Ángel Reséndez, the railroad killer, who was suspected of 23 murders in the US and Mexico, was Edwin's idol. He created a detailed presentation about Reséndez, using real photos of the victims. Edwin became so absorbed in these criminals' lives that he developed a strong desire to control others. He craved absolute power over someone's life, a desire that grew stronger over time and consumed his thoughts. Edwin Lara once deeply resented his ex-girlfriend's uncle and even considered killing her. However, he stopped himself, realizing it would ruin his relationship with his wife, Isabel. He valued her too much to hurt her and learned to control his violent impulses. Isabel, unknowingly, was the only person who could keep him from acting on his dark thoughts. After college, both Edwin and Isabel applied to the police academy, hoping to become police officers together. However, Edwin failed the entrance exam, while Isabel passed easily. He was heartbroken that Isabel's dream came true, but his did not. This disparity caused Edwin to become angry and resentful towards Isabel, as if she were to blame for his failure. Edwin, needing work, became a security guard at Central Oregon Community College, where he had been a student. At the same time, Isabel was away at the police academy for long stretches. This made Edwin even angrier, and he started planning revenge. He began an affair with Alice, who lived in California. Their marriage was already in trouble, and Edwin's affair made things worse. He used a secret phone and social media account to talk to Alice, making up a new identity and pretending to be a police officer. While Isabel was at the academy, Edwin brought Alice to their home, took her on expensive dates, booked fancy hotels, and threw private parties for her. At Central Oregon Community College, Edwin's behavior changed noticeably. He bragged to co-workers about his affair and showed them explicit photos of himself with Alice. Most people didn't want to hear about his personal life and began avoiding him, especially his female colleagues, who felt uneasy. His behavior then became disturbing. Edwin started showing the other security guards graphic images of dead bodies he found online, either printed out or on his phone. He was also obsessed with videos of deaths, car accidents, and drownings. He seemed to get pleasure from his colleagues' horrified reactions. In 2016, Isabel learned that Edwin was having an affair. She felt betrayed and hurt, wondering what she had done to deserve it. Edwin, realizing he was about to lose Isabel, ended the affair immediately. He asked for her forgiveness and promised to make up for his actions. Isabel decided to give their relationship another try, but the affair had damaged their trust. For the next 6 months, she constantly checked up on Edwin, even visiting his workplace. During this time, Edwin gave her no reason to distrust him, and slowly, she began to trust him again. However, under his wife's watchful eye, Edwin grew increasingly isolated. He stopped bothering his colleagues, avoided his friends, and made a conscious effort to ignore other women. Yet, his dark, criminal impulses began to resurface. It was during this period that he crossed paths with Kaylee Sawyer. Kaylee was born in Bend, Oregon, on March 2, 1993. Known for her kindness and compassion, Kaylee was the oldest of 5 children. Her ever-present smile and ability to connect with others made her a beloved friend. Those who knew her described her as beautiful, both inside and out. Kaylee enjoyed drawing, writing poetry, snowboarding, and photography. Driven by a desire to help people, she dreamed of becoming a neurosurgeon. After high school, she earned a medical degree and began working as a dental assistant. During this time, she met Cameron Riemhofer and they started dating. At age 23, Kaylee decided to continue her education and enrolled at Central Oregon Community College. Edwin Lara worked there as a security guard. Kaylee and Cameron moved into an apartment near the campus, surrounded by tall pine trees and offering a view of the mountains. On Saturday, July 23, 2016, Kaylee attended a close friend's bachelorette party, an event she had eagerly anticipated for weeks. What began as a beautiful summer evening quickly devolved into an unimaginable nightmare. Dressed in a black dress, Kaylee enjoyed the night with her friends, hopping from bar to bar, drinking and dancing. Around midnight, she texted her boyfriend, asking him to pick her up and drive her home. On the way back to their apartment, they had a heated argument. The reason for the dispute remains unknown. Just before they reached the building's entrance, Kaylee jumped out of the car and headed in the opposite direction, apparently needing to calm her post-drinking hangover. Cameron went up to their apartment and waited, hoping she would follow him. 10 minutes later, Cameron went back downstairs, but Kaylee was nowhere to be found. While such behavior wasn't entirely unusual for Kaylee, she was an impulsive girl who often needed time alone to calm down and sort out her feelings after arguments. Cameron still expected her return. This time, however, he became concerned when he called her phone, but there was no answer. Then he sent over a dozen messages urging her to come back. However, at some point, the messages stopped going through as Kaylee's phone was unreachable. Cameron got into the car and began searching the nearby streets, but to no avail. After circling the area a couple of times, upset, he returned to the apartment and went to bed. Cameron hoped to wake up in the morning and find Kaylee at home, but she didn't show up. That's when he truly panicked. He started calling Kaylee's number non-stop, but all calls went to voicemail. Cameron called her father, hoping she had spent the night at her parents' place, but her father said he hadn't seen his daughter recently. Later on Sunday, when Kaylee still hadn't appeared and no one knew where she was, her boyfriend called 911 and reported the disappearance of her. However, as often happens, the police were not in a hurry to start searching. Kaylee was an adult and had the right to go wherever she pleased. Cameron was advised to wait. If his girlfriend didn't show up within 48 hours, they would declare her missing and then take action. Cameron sensed trouble but didn't know what to do. But Kaylee's mom wasn't about to sit idly by. She was certain her daughter would have warned her parents if she were planning to go somewhere. She felt in her gut that something was wrong. She called the police herself and claimed her daughter suffered from seizures. In truth, this was a white lie to spur action. The girl had indeed experienced seizures in her teenage years, but that was long in the past. Kaylee's mom knew the authorities would be more likely to start searching if they believed Kaylee was ill. The police did indeed spring into action before the 48-hour mark. First, they brought Cameron to the police station and questioned him about the argument in the car that led to Kaylee getting out and disappearing in an unknown direction. Kaylee's boyfriend was the last person to see her alive, so it's understandable why the detectives treated him with suspicion. He answered all questions clearly. It was clear how worried he was about his girlfriend and how genuinely he cared for her safety. Even an inexperienced officer could tell that Cameron loved Kaylee with all his heart. When Monday morning came and Kaylee didn't show up for work, the police concluded that something bad had happened to her. The search began as usual. Detectives first interviewed all her acquaintances, then started combing the city and surrounding areas. Volunteers joined the authorities. But where could Kaylee have vanished to in the middle of the night? On Saturday evening, when Kaylee jumped out of her boyfriend's car, she went for a walk to calm down after the argument. Her phone battery was nearly dead. She didn't know where to go, and her feet led her to the campus of Central Oregon Community College. On the college campus, Kaylee came across a security guard sitting in a service vehicle that resembled a police SUV. The girl immediately felt safe. As she passed by, the man got out of the vehicle and called out to her. It was Edwin Lara, dressed in a security guard uniform and armed with a pepper spray canister, handcuffs, and a bulletproof vest. That day, he was working the night shift, which ended at 2 a.m. in the morning. We might never know precisely what they talked about. Perhaps the guard offered Kaylee a ride home or access to a phone. Whatever the reason, Kaylee ended up inside Edwin Lara's security vehicle. This vehicle resembled a police car, featuring a metal divider between the front and back seats and automatically locking doors, which would have trapped anyone in the back. Kaylee's phone had died, so she couldn't call for help. Edwin offered her intimate, but she refused. Then he offered her money for sex, and she refused again. This made Edwin angry, and he began to insult her, saying her clothes made her look like an escort. Kaylee panicked as Edwin became aggressive. She was trapped in the car and screamed, hoping someone would hear her. But this only made Edwin angrier. He opened the back door and started choking her. Kaylee tried to fight him off, but Edwin was much stronger and easily overpowered the young, intoxicated woman, causing her to lose consciousness. He then drove her to a deserted, abandoned parking lot. Kaylee woke up, likely realizing she was about to die. Desperate, she tried to reach the dashboard through the metal grate to activate the car's flashing lights or siren, hoping someone would notice. However, she couldn't reach. When the car stopped in the empty lot, Edwin pulled Kaylee out and threw her onto the ground. He pinned her down and began strangling her until she lost consciousness. Edwin, to ensure Kaylee was dead, grabbed a stone and repeatedly struck her head. Edwin believed she was dead. He then pulled down his pants and abused her unconscious body. After this, Edwin discovered Kaylee was still alive. He dragged her behind some trees, feeling a strong urge to finally kill her. He had fantasized about this for years and was frustrated by his initial failure. He found a large rock and repeatedly struck Kaylee's head, stopping only when he was certain she was dead. Edwin deliberately chose a readily available rock as his weapon. He idolized Angel Resendez, the railroad killer, who was known for using objects found at hand and attacking impulsively. Edwin's actions that night mirrored this behavior. After murdering Kaylee, Edwin left her body and drove away. He showered, chatted normally with co-workers, and then used wet wipes to wipe down the work vehicle, eliminating any traces of Kaylee's presence. After his shift, Edwin drove his own car back to where he left the body. To protect his car from blood, he covered Kaylee's head with a plastic bag, placed her in the trunk, drove to a remote location, and dumped her body in a ditch. He then returned home to his wife without raising suspicion. The next day, Sunday, Edwin and Isabel went to church and a movie. Edwin seemed unusually preoccupied. Isabel assumed this was because of marital issues, suspecting Edwin of infidelity and an internal struggle to confess. However, the real reason was far more sinister. On Monday morning, he found Isabel in the kitchen as she prepared for work. Crying, he confessed that while patrolling the campus in the service vehicle, he had accidentally hit a woman who ran into the road in the dark. He claimed he hadn't seen her and, terrified of the repercussions, had moved her body away from the college and abandoned it on the highway. As soon as Isabel, shocked by her husband's story, began asking why he did it and why he hadn't called an ambulance, Edwin panicked. He clearly lost his composure and grabbed his wife's service pistol. Edwin then jumped into his car and sped off in an unknown direction. Isabel, a police officer, reported to the nearest police station that her husband, Edwin Lara, a security guard at Central Oregon Community College, had confessed to a crime. She also reported that Edwin had run away with her police weapon. Isabel was worried that Edwin, being emotionally unstable, might hurt himself. She pleaded with the detectives to find him quickly. However, the police prioritized public safety, believing Edwin posed a threat to others. He had confessed to murder, fled with a gun, and was likely panicking, making him unpredictable. Detectives went to the Lara's home to search for clues about Edwin's possible whereabouts. Investigators made a disturbing discovery in a backyard shed, a blood-soaked purse belonging to Kaylee Sawyer. The purse contained her identification and blood-stained shoes, along with other small items documented in a 62-page inventory. Entering this information into the system revealed that Kaylee had been reported missing that weekend. Besides Kaylee's belongings, detectives found Edwin's uniform inside the house, suggesting he intended to get rid of it. They also found a short college paper about the railroad killer. All of this indicated the possible direction of Edwin's next actions. After these items were found, Edwin Lara's connection to Kaylee's disappearance was clear, and a warrant was issued for his arrest on suspicion of murder. While investigators worked to understand the timeline of Edwin's actions, they set up a plan to stop his vehicle on all roads in Oregon and neighboring California. It was crucial to catch Edwin quickly because he was armed and considered dangerous. Exactly, Edwin had other plans and was already looking for another victim. 19-year-old Andrea Elizabeth Mays had just finished her shift at a mall in Salem, Oregon, and was about to drive home to her boyfriend. As she sat in her car, unaware of what was happening around her, she was scrolling through social media and took a selfie. Andrea had just typed a message to a friend and was about to send it when a hand suddenly reached through the window. Andrea initially believed her colleagues were joking, but then a stranger leaned into her car, opened the passenger door, got in, and held a gun to her head. The man, Edwin Lara, ordered Andrea to start the car and drive to California. She, terrified, was willing to do anything to prevent him from firing the gun. She obeyed his instructions and drove onto the highway towards California. Edwin started talking about how he had recently attacked Kaylee Sawyer, adding extra details to make Andrea uncomfortable. This conversation took place on the evening of Monday, July 25, 2016, which was 2 days after Kaylee was murdered. As it got dark, Edwin suggested they stay at a motel for the night to avoid suspicion. He made Andrea act like his girlfriend. He threatened to kill her and anyone else around if she tried to get help. After getting to the motel room, Edwin handcuffed his captive to the bathroom door and covered her head with a T-shirt so she couldn't see. He then took a shower and brought her to the bed. Edwin forced her to swallow a sleeping pill and started to make abuse advances. When Andrea's phone alarm went off, she quickly made up a story. She claimed she had an intimate transmitted infection and the alarm was a reminder to take her medication. Andrea desperately wanted to avoid being touched by Edwin, so she said the first thing that came to her mind. Luckily, it worked. At 1:30 a.m., Edwin forced Andrea out of the room and into the passenger seat of her car. He then got in the driver's seat, stating that Andrea would be his human shield. Their dangerous journey continued into the early hours of Tuesday, July 26th, as they crossed the border into California. When Edwin noticed that Andrea's car was having problems, he decided to stop and steal another vehicle. He pulled into the parking lot of a roadside motel and saw Jack Norman Levy loading photography equipment into his car after staying the night. Edwin approached Jack, pulled out a gun, and demanded the car keys. Jack was shot in the stomach after he unexpectedly started shouting. Edwin, with Andrea, quickly escaped. Jack survived, and motel staff who heard the noise called for an ambulance. Edwin and Andrea fled to a nearby gas station. There, Edwin saw an old Honda with a 76-year-old woman and her 2 teenage grandsons inside. He took them hostage, unfazed by their ages. The boys' father and grandfather were inside the gas station at the time. Edwin forced Andrea into the back seat with the grandmother and grandsons. He then got into the passenger seat and ordered the 17-year-old, a recent driver's license recipient, to drive. The teenager now had to drive, aware of the danger they were in. Witnesses to the kidnapping explained what had happened, and they quickly reported the incident to the police. Edwin, the kidnapper, was clearly unstable. He pointed a gun and grabbed a cell phone from one of the teenagers to stop them from calling for help. Then, sounding calmer, Edwin told his hostages how much he wanted to kill someone. He confessed to having already killed a girl and shooting a man in a motel parking lot. Edwin also tried to convince them that he used to be a good person and had wanted to be a police officer. He seemed angry that he never achieved his dream of becoming a law enforcement officer. The teenage driver sensed Edwin's shift in attitude and tried to reason with him. He emphasized that their grandmother was old and fragile, and that he and his brother were just young boys. He pleaded with Edwin not to hurt an elderly woman nearing the end of her life, or children who hadn't even experienced it yet. Surprisingly, his words worked. After driving roughly 50 kilometers, Edwin let the grandmother and her grandsons out near a small town. He claimed their complaining and crying had irritated him, so he was leaving them to continue on their own. Andrea also begged to be released, but Edwin refused because he still needed her as a shield. He told her she would remain with him until the end. He abandoned the 3 hostages on the side of the road, and then sped away in the old Honda. On the way, Edwin called his wife, Isabel, who begged Edwin to surrender and stop hurting people. Instead, Edwin sped away in his car. A police chase was already happening. A highway patrol officer saw a car speeding on the interstate and attempted to pull it over. The driver refused to stop, so the officer activated his lights and pursued the vehicle. Edwin, the driver, was becoming increasingly erratic and dangerous. Just then, a police helicopter arrived, possibly because the police had tracked Isabel's call or located Edwin's Honda using information from the released hostages. After a high-speed chase reaching over 160 kilometers per hour, Edwin decided to surrender. He called 911. He told the dispatcher that Edwin had killed 2 people, kidnapped a girl, and was armed and wearing a bulletproof vest. Shortly after, Edwin slowed down and stopped the car, which was immediately surrounded by police. Edwin Lara was arrested, and Andrea was relieved that the ordeal was finally over. However, that wasn't the whole story. Police suspected Andrea was involved in the crime. They removed her from the vehicle, handcuffed her, and brought her to the station as a suspect. There, they fingerprinted her, searched her, and placed her in a cell. She waited hours before being questioned. Only then did the police understand she was a kidnapping victim herself. The news reported the capture of a dangerous criminal. Kaylee Sawyer's parents, hearing that a kidnapped girl was alive, hoped their daughter would be found safe. They immediately contacted the police, but their hope was dashed. The girl found with Edwin was not Kaylee. Detectives interrogated Edwin Lara for about 6 hours. He spent much of the time trying to portray himself as a good person. Initially, police hoped Kaylee Sawyer was still alive, but Edwin soon confessed that she was dead. He admitted to dumping her body in a ditch near his parents' house. Edwin also revealed that he had a long-standing desire to kill, but his wife, Isabel, had helped him control it. Edwin Lara was charged with Kaylee Sawyer's murder. While police suspected he might be connected to other crimes, they found no evidence linking him to other victims. Kaylee Sawyer's body was found on the roadside. She had suffered a violent death. An autopsy revealed that she died from head trauma caused by a blunt object, strangulation, and abuse. The wounds on her body indicated that she had fought for her life. At the trial, Edwin Lara, whose actions led to Kaylee Sawyer's death, was present along with Sawyer's family. He asked the family for forgiveness and offered a prayer for Kaylee, but most of the family left the courtroom during his prayer. Edwin Lara pleaded guilty to aggravated murder with aggravating circumstances to avoid the death penalty and received a life sentence without parole. In a separate trial, Edwin also pleaded guilty to kidnapping Andrea Elizabeth Mays and received another life sentence. In 2019, Oregon enacted Kaylee's Law. By law, campus security vehicles, uniforms, and equipment cannot have the appearance of law enforcement. Vehicles cannot have roof lights or push-up bumpers. Vehicles cannot have partitions, known as cages, between the front and rear seats. Vehicles must have GPS, interior cameras, or video-recorded dispatch systems. The fact that Edwin Lara will now spend his life in a prison uniform, a far cry from his security guard uniform, offers some solace. Law enforcement agencies operate differently across countries. In some places, even the slightest offense can result in the harshest punishment, while in others, cruel murderers repeatedly find themselves living among ordinary people, causing indignation, hatred, and fear. Everyone who knew Sonia Forsyth well was struck by her beauty and intelligence. Smart and mature beyond her 13 years, Sonia differed significantly from her peers. This maturity sometimes seemed at odds with her youthful appearance. At the same time, she was deeply sentimental, preferring the comforts of home to the typical passions of a teenager. Sonia quickly became homesick, even when separated from her family for short periods. She lived in the northern part of Belfast, Ireland. Her mother was named Audrey. In the early 90s, she began a new relationship and separated from Sonia's biological father. In addition to Sonia, Audrey had a younger daughter from a previous relationship. This small family lived on Sydney Street West. Recognizing Sonia's attractive appearance, Audrey enrolled her in a modeling school for girls. She believed her daughter could build a successful career in that field, or something similar. Although Sonia was a homebody, she had friends. She made acquaintances easily but kept a limited circle of people she trusted. On weekdays and weekends, Sonia often went out to meet them and have fun, but she never stayed out late and never stayed overnight at a friend's house. On June 30, 1991, she also went to visit a friend. Sonia agreed with her parents to return home for dinner around 6 p.m. She arrived home, ate, and then left again around 7 p.m., promising to go for a short walk. The Forsyth family had no reason to worry. Their area was generally quiet and safe, with little to no crime. However, that dinner with Sonia turned out to be their last. It was a typical summer evening. Sonia was expected to return soon, as she promised to stay with her friend for only a couple of hours. When she didn't return at the appointed time, Audrey immediately became concerned, though she tried not to panic. Breaking a promise was very uncharacteristic of her daughter, who was usually very responsible. Audrey tried calling Sonia's friends, the places where she might have gone, but couldn't find her. Several hours passed, and Audrey could no longer contain her anxiety. She went to the police and reported Sonia missing. The police officers initially offered standard reassurances, suggesting that Sonia would return soon, or that she might simply be staying late with friends. Audrey dismissed these suggestions, insisting that such behavior was not typical of Sonia, and that she felt something alarming had happened. Fortunately, she convinced the police to begin an investigation that same night. They started searching, but in the dark, their possibilities were limited. The Forsyth family lived in a small part of the city with apartment buildings and residential complexes. Rumors spread quickly, and many people knew Sonia. Furthermore, there was little crime in the area, so the disappearance of the 13-year-old schoolgirl quickly attracted the attention of all city residents. On the one hand, this provoked the spread of various rumors, which could lead to false leads that would only mislead investigators. On the other hand, it provided an opportunity for witnesses with valuable information to contact the police station. Despite the risks, the family contacted local newspapers. Sonia's disappearance was a central focus in the media. Audrey provided a photograph of her daughter, as well as a detailed description of the clothes she was wearing when she left home, a schoolgirl with dark hair and brown eyes, dressed in black jeans, a burgundy jumper, and white shoes. Her noticeable appearance should have aided the search. However, practically no valuable information was received. The local community quickly learned about the incident, but very few official statements were released, leading to public fear. Activity in the investigation was so low that detectives openly expressed concern for Sonia's safety. Incoming calls were checked, but nothing of significance was found. The relatives denied the possibility that Sonia could have run away. They maintained that Sonia had no problems at home, enjoyed excellent relationships with her mother, sister, and stepfather. She was not prone to conflict, tending to avoid such situations. Detectives investigated Sonia's immediate circle, interviewing all acquaintances from the teenager's close social group. However, friends, relatives, and classmates had no information about what had happened. The friend Sonia reportedly went to see after dinner stated that she never arrived. Because no one had mobile phones at that time, it was impossible to track her location. Sonia and her friend simply went for a walk and returned home before dinner. They did not see each other again. These accounts were corroborated by witnesses, with only minor variations in time intervals. This information, however, did not yield any new leads. By July, suspicion arose that Sonia might have been kidnapped. Yet, to date, no ransom demands had been made to the family. As time passed, the hope of finding Sonia alive dwindled. A special working group, comprised of the most experienced detectives and law enforcement officers familiar with abduction cases, was formed. Several search teams, numerous volunteers, and even canine units with specially trained dogs combed the city, but without success. The search area was expanded to include not only the streets of Belfast but also the surrounding suburbs. By July 19th, the police were pursuing a new hypothesis. Shortly before Sonia's disappearance, the marching bands of Belfast began gathering for a short thematic trip to Scotland. According to relatives, Sonia had always shown great interest in them. On the day of Sonia's disappearance, about 60 orchestral groups went to Scotland to perform at a music festival. It was theorized that Sonia might have gone with them. It was strange that the girl did not warn anyone and left without her things, but everyone clung to this history. Her family embraced this theory, hoping it would help them find her. Sonia was very interested in marching bands, and Scotland, with its many performances and musical events, was attracting a lot of young people at the time. When this theory arose, most of the musicians had already gone home, but Sonia was still missing. Detectives thought the last ferry from Scotland was the last possible one Sonia could have been on, so Audrey waited for it. Search teams monitored all routes, checked everyone arriving at the port, but Sonia was not on that ferry. The search team continued to comb the areas of Ireland. On July 23rd, the head of the operation announced that the Shankill, Woodvale, and Old Park areas had been thoroughly inspected, but this yielded no new clues. Sonia seemed to have vanished. During the same period, a campaign was launched to post advertisements in various areas of Belfast, but unfortunately, these efforts also failed to produce any valuable information. The agonizing weeks of silence turned into months of waiting and anxiety. Audrey was forced to somehow continue to live without understanding what had happened to her eldest daughter. During this time, the mother focused on her youngest child, hoping to forget. However, this provided little comfort. Audrey said that almost every night, she had the same nightmare. A detective leading the search knocked on her door and asked her to identify a body found in the morgue. The investigation stalled. There were no leads, not even false ones, only silence. Audrey clung to the hope that the New Year holidays would bring a postcard or a letter from her daughter, revealing her whereabouts and what had happened. However, these hopes proved futile. Finally, in the last days of January 1992, new information surfaced. The police station was contacted by the parents and a 15-year-old girl, whose name was withheld for her safety. She claimed to be a victim of a vast network of child molesters. Her report triggered one of the largest investigations into child abuse and abuse violence against minors in the history of Northern Ireland. The teenager stated that several houses in the Belfast area were being used to repeatedly abuse children. She described several elderly men involved in a series of crimes that had been ongoing for approximately a year and a half. This timeline coincided with Sonia's disappearance. One of the houses the victim mentioned was located only a couple of hundred meters from the location where Sonia was supposed to meet her friends. When searching the house, detectives found many sensitive photos of girls, as well as other evidence corroborating the 15-year-old story. A 53-year-old man was arrested and charged with abusing 2 schoolgirls. While authorities suspected him of habitual abuse, they were unable to confirm these suspicions. The other suspects were investigated and released. The police carefully examined the possibility that the detainee was involved in Sonia Forsythe's disappearance. The crimes of the child abuse became even more widely known than Sonia's disappearance. It was believed that the girl could also have become a victim of these criminals. A neighbor said she had seen Sonia near the location before. Despite a thorough investigation, the police were unable to find any connection between the child abuse ring and Sonia. For Audrey, the agonizing months turned into years. In March 1996, law enforcement officers involved in the case announced they would re-examine the case of Sonia. Archives were reviewed, scant evidence was re-analyzed, and old witnesses were sought and re-interviewed. One of the factors driving this renewed effort was the availability of new DNA analysis methods that had been unavailable during the initial investigation. They believed something important might have been missed and could now be verified. On March 19, 1996, at around 1 o'clock in the morning, emergency services in Belfast received a report of a fire in one of the apartments in a complex located a couple of hundred meters from the Forsythe house. Firefighters arrived quickly and managed to contain the fire before it spread to neighboring buildings. No one was hurt, and the damage from the fire was minimal. The fire department's investigation concluded that the fire was likely arson, not an accident. While the walls were charred and the floor was smoke-filled, only repairs were needed. The tenants of the apartment were away, sparing them from harm, but the damage was still severe enough to require repair. Contractors from the housing authority were called in to clean up the premises, preparing them for re-renting. It was necessary to change the decoration and replace some of the furniture. During this routine work, the owners decided to inspect the entire property and noticed an old coal bunker located in the far corner of the courtyard. From the outside, everything seemed normal. However, they spotted a rolled-up carpet in an inconspicuous place. The carpet belonged to the owners but had been missing for quite some time. They decided to retrieve it and clean it up before using it in the apartment again. Upon unrolling it, they realized they had made a terrible mistake. Inside was a naked body, wearing only socks. The remains were badly decomposed. Law enforcement was immediately called to the scene and took the gruesome discovery for forensic examination. It quickly became clear that the body was the victim of a violent crime, as the skull had several fractures. Examination confirmed the victim was Sonia Forsythe. Comparing the time of disappearance with information provided by the landlord, police discovered that a 24-year-old man named James Craig had lived in the apartment in 1991. At least up until that point, he had no criminal record. Police went to Liverpool to arrest James, now 24 years old. Detectives learned that during the period of Sonia's disappearance, James had lived in the flat and also worked at a nearby shop owned by his mother. James denied any guilt, so investigators interviewed neighbors and the owners of the property. They provided valuable information. One neighbor recalled that on the night of Sonia's disappearance, she had seen a girl come to James's apartment. They talked and smoked on the street. Due to the significant age difference, the couple looked unusual, so the woman watched them for a long time and saw the teenage girl enter James's apartment through. The neighbor observed the young people sitting on the sofa and talking. What happened later remained a mystery, because James drew the curtains a few minutes later. Other neighbors said that for years they had detected an unpleasant odor but could not identify its source. They assumed it was a problem with the sewage system or water pipes. They called the plumber several times, but the origin of the smell remained a mystery. James had spoken to the police on several occasions. He insisted that he was not involved in the crime, had never noticed any unpleasant smell, and had no idea what happened to Sonia. The local police station management discovered that for 2 weeks after Sonia's disappearance, the search party had passed by and searched the territory around the house. It was unclear how they could have missed such a strong, distinctive smell or failed to find the body wrapped in the carpet. The search party leader explained they didn't find the body because they were looking for a living person, not a corpse. They admitted they ignored the smell, perhaps because it wasn't as strong then. However, this seemed unlikely given the summer heat, which accelerates decomposition. Detectives searched the apartment and surrounding area multiple times and spoke to James, who admitted seeing Sonia that evening. A neighbor also confirmed seeing her. Despite this information, investigators didn't follow up effectively. These failures suggest police negligence. Sonia's body was discovered at the end of March 1996. Blood was found in 2 cabinets located on the apartment grounds. Analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Sonia, indicating that the girl had been there for some time. The carpet that the landlords mentioned mysteriously disappeared shortly after Sonia's disappearance. In addition, a metal poker with suspicious traces was found. Examination confirmed that the blood on it belonged to Sonia. Had the killer not organized the arson of the rented housing, it is possible the case would have remained unsolved. James Craig was arrested and accused of murdering Sonia Forsyth. About 2 weeks after Sonia's body was discovered, the remains were fully examined and then given to her family, who were finally able to bury her. This was a shock to Audrey, Sonia's mother, but also a relief, as she finally knew what had happened to her daughter. Many relatives of missing people say that not knowing what happened to a loved one is psychologically harder than knowing the truth. Due to Sonia's murder and the painful memories associated with their old house, the Forsyth family moved. On April 21, 1998, James Craig was charged in court with the murder of Sonia Forsyth. The prosecutor stated that Sonia was on her way to a friend's house on the night of her death when she encountered James. He persuaded her to go to his home, where he attacked and likely abused her. James then beat Sonia to death with a poker, fracturing her skull, face, and jaw. He initially hid her body in a closet before wrapping it in a carpet and concealing it in a coal bunker in the house's courtyard. Given the time that had passed, there was practically no direct evidence against James. However, thanks to the testimony of a witness, the prosecutor's office had no doubt that James Craig had committed this terrible crime. It is curious that the negligence of the police was almost not advertised and went unpunished by the prosecution. A forensic expert, who conducted an examination of the body, the carpet, and the poker found in the apartment, testified at the trial, agreeing that the marks on the victim's skull were identical in shape to the instrument. Even though the evidence suggested otherwise, James maintained his innocence in Sonia's death. He admitted that on the night she disappeared, he ran into her on the street when she asked him for a cigarette. He gave her one, and they started talking. James said they lived nearby and occasionally saw each other, but they never spoke, so he didn't even know her name. After this meeting, Sonia went with him to a bar across the street, where he bought her cigarettes and himself a couple of beers. This matched a neighbor's statement that they were seen together in front of the apartment building, smoking. James said Sonia walked back with him from the bar, but he denied that she went inside his apartment. He claimed he said goodbye to her shortly after and later saw her with 2 other girls sitting on a windowsill of a nearby abandoned house. James could not explain the presence of Sonia's blood in the rented apartment where he lived. The traces found in a closet and on the carpet in which the body was wrapped were identical and also matched the DNA profiles obtained from Sonia's biological parents. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury quickly found James Craig guilty of murdering Sonia Forsyth. The courtroom was packed for the sentencing, as everyone wanted justice. One man, a father of daughters, was so enraged he tried to attack James, but his friends restrained him. James was ultimately sentenced to life in prison, considered a just punishment for his crime. Following the verdict, a detective involved in Sonia's disappearance case conceded that errors might have been made during the investigation. Specifically, they initially presumed Sonia was alive and missing, which led them to neglect searching the area near her apartment thoroughly. The story took a turn for the worse when James was released from prison in 2019. He moved into a hostel for former offenders in Portadown. Following Sonia's murder, her mother, Audrey, created a social media page, which became popular around 2019. On this page, she wrote about how difficult each anniversary of Sonia's death was, and how much harder it was knowing James was free. She worried that people near him were now in danger. Audrey's posts were very direct and strongly worded. The story doesn't end there. 2 years later, James was arrested again. It was discovered that in the late 1980s and early 1990s, he had attacked 2 girls under the age of 9, attempting to abuse them near the same location where he murdered Sonia. He received a surprisingly light sentence for these crimes. The court reasoned that because these attacks happened before he was punished for Sonia's murder, they couldn't be considered repeat offenses. There were also allegations of him molesting and abusing other young victims in the same apartment where he killed Sonia. However, James denied these allegations, and due to lack of evidence, he was never charged. The Forsyth family received news of this on the 32nd anniversary of their daughter's murder. Sonia's sister, Nikki, by then an adult woman, said she dreaded the thought of this man freely walking the streets of Belfast. She urged anyone who saw James to stay away from him and prevent him from approaching their children, adding that, in her opinion, law enforcement agencies wouldn't save anyone. Andre Rebello's life in Perth looks perfect from the outside. He lives in a modern house, has a dream family with his partner Gracie Piscopo and their young son. A quick glance at their social media would make them look like the ideal couple, stylish, successful, and living the high life. However, behind their polished photos and carefully curated posts lay a far more complicated reality. Andre and Gracie met in 2015 when Andre was just 19 years old. Born in 1996, he was instantly drawn to her charm and ambition. Gracie was determined to succeed. Once a gym receptionist, her life transformed when she began posting personal photos online. Her confidence, aesthetics, and dedication helped her amass a huge following, eventually turning her into a prominent influencer earning an impressive $170,000 annually. With success came a dazzling lifestyle. Gracie's career afforded her designer clothing, luxurious vacations, and stays in high-end hotels. Andre, unfamiliar with this world, was quickly swept up in it. Together, they traveled, meticulously documenting their adventures, and shared curated glimpses of their lives, shopping hauls, expensive cars, and picturesque moments from exotic locations. To everyone, it was aspirational content, a beautiful woman with a thriving career, her athletic and supportive partner, and a baby that enhanced their branding as the ultimate family. They drove the latest Range Rover, lived in a spacious designer home, and always seemed to exude happiness. As Gracie's influence grew, Andre, who preferred to remain in the background, decided to fully commit himself to supporting her career. Managing brand deals and financial decisions became overwhelming for Gracie, so Andre made a life-changing decision. He dropped out of university and became her full-time assistant. He handled contracts, filtered brand opportunities, and managed her finances. Despite playing an essential role in her growing enterprise, Andre earned a mere $20,000 annually. To their online audience, Gracie was undeniably the star, while Andre remained in the background. Their lives appeared even more polished with the birth of their son. The baby became a regular feature in their content, providing Gracie opportunities to explore parenting endorsements. They promote baby products, lifestyle brands, and post sponsored posts about family life. Both Andre and Gracie spend a lot of time every day curating their online image. As Gracie's fame grew, Andre became more restless and yearned to find something he could call his own. This led him to explore cryptocurrency, a world far removed from influencer culture. He envisioned it as a path to success and often reassured Gracie that their investments would eventually pay off, though progress seemed slow. However, not everyone agrees with Andre's optimism. His mother, Colleen Rebello, grew concerned about the direction his life was taking. As a mother of 4, 3 sons and a daughter, she had always valued stability and education. Andre's decision to leave university to manage Gracie's social media career deeply worried her. To Colleen, the influencer world seemed unpredictable, relying heavily on youth, beauty, and ever-changing trends. She feared that fame and financial success would be fleeting. Confiding in a close friend, Colleen often expressed her belief that Andre was sacrificing long-term stability for short-term gains. However, as a devoted mother, she still constantly supported her children's decisions, despite always feeling uneasy in her heart. As a single mother, Colleen had raised her family alone after her marriage ended in 2010. As a teacher, she always gave her children love, established discipline and imparted strong values, despite the many difficulties she faced. When her children grew older, she decided to pursue a dream of her own. In 2020, she proudly completed a degree in healthcare, ready to embark on a new chapter in her career. At 58, she was optimistic and excited about what the future held. Tragically, that hope was shattered on the morning of May 25, 2020. The day started as a typical one for the family. Colleen spoke with some of her children. Her youngest son, Fabian, was still living at home, while her daughter, Monique, had temporarily moved in to be closer to her paramedic training facility. That morning, Monique and Fabian prepared for their day. Fabian, who worked part-time at a nearby supermarket, relied on his mother, Colleen, to drop him off at 10 a.m. and pick him up at 2 p.m. However, when Fabian finished his shift, his mother didn't show up to collect him. He called her phone 13 times but got no answer. It wasn't a long walk home, just 10 to 15 minutes, but something felt wrong. His mother was always punctual and reliable, never forgetting to pick him up or check on him at home. Fabian couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was off. When Fabian arrived home, the house was unusually quiet. He heard the shower running, which gave him some relief. Perhaps she had lost track of time. Yet, it still seemed strange. Why hadn't she answered his calls? Fabian called out to her but got no response. He called her name again, but the silence remained. Growing increasingly worried, he reluctantly approached the bathroom door. Though it felt like intruding on her privacy, the eerie silence was too concerning to ignore. Fabian opened the bathroom door and was confronted with a chilling sight. His mother, Colleen, was kneeling on the shower floor, leaning lifelessly against the tiled wall. Panicked, Fabian pulled her into the middle of the bathroom and covered her with a towel. With shaking hands, he called emergency services and tried to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Despite his efforts, her skin felt cold, and her face and neck had a bluish-gray tint that alarmed him. When paramedics arrived, they took over but were unable to revive her. She was pronounced dead. Fabian, devastated, messaged his sister Monique, urging her to come home immediately. He also attempted to contact his older brother, Andre, but received no reply. Monique arrived around 3 p.m. and tried calling and texting Andre herself. He eventually showed up with his partner, Gracie, and their young son. The atmosphere in the home was one of disbelief and heartbreak. Both Fabian and Monique had spoken to Colleen that morning, and she had been her usual attentive and calm self. There had been no signs of illness or unusual behavior. Now, just a few hours later, she was gone. An autopsy was performed, but it provided no answers. Her cause of death remained undetermined. For her children, the idea that their healthy, active mother had died of natural causes was almost impossible to accept. They began to focus on small, strange details that didn't make sense. For instance, Colleen always removed her gold wristwatch and jewelry before taking a shower, but Fabian had found her wearing them. She also typically placed an anti-slip mat inside the tub, but on that day, the mat had been left draped over the side. These deviations from her daily habits felt significant, adding to the family's confusion and suspicion. The police found no signs of forced entry. All the windows and doors were locked, and nothing appeared to be missing. With no evident foul play or clear cause of death, authorities ruled her death as a natural one. Still, her family was left devastated and with many unanswered questions. Weeks later, the situation took an unforeseen twist as the police received a tip from an insurance company, not about Colleen's death itself, but regarding possible fraud. Their investigation revealed that someone had submitted fraudulent paperwork, and suspicion fell on Andre Rebello. The discovery that followed was shocking. Just a week before Colleen's sudden death, Andre had taken out 3 separate life insurance policies in her name. Together, these policies amounted to over $1 million, and Andre was the sole beneficiary. None of his siblings were listed. After Colleen's death, Andre quickly contacted the insurance companies to claim the payouts. Two of the companies immediately rejected the claims, citing the suspicious timing between the policy's activation and her death. The third company was still reviewing the claim but requested additional documentation. That's when the inconsistencies began to emerge. One document Andre submitted listed the wrong date of birth for Colleen. It had his own birthday instead. Other paperwork, submitted unusually fast, raised further concerns. Medical records appeared to be fraudulent. One claimed Colleen had died from a ruptured aneurysm leading to a subarachnoid hemorrhage, but this contradicted the official autopsy report. Even more disturbing was a supposed will, allegedly written and signed by Colleen, that named Andre as her sole heir, completely excluding her other children. To her family, this was unimaginable. Colleen had always treated her children equally, and the idea of such favoritism was deeply unsettling. As investigators dug deeper, more deceit came to light. Andre had submitted falsified psychiatric evaluations to support the contested will. Shockingly, he even used artificial intelligence to produce a voice recording that was intended to validate the changes. The complexity of the deception was staggering. In response to the mounting evidence, Andre offered an explanation. He claimed his mother had been fully aware of everything. He said the life insurance policies and will were part of a financial plan they had discussed. According to Andre, his mother, Colleen, had entrusted him with handling the paperwork and funds, with the understanding that he would later divide the inheritance equally among his siblings. The police, however, were unconvinced. The backdated insurance policies, fraudulent documents, and circumstances of Colleen's death cast serious doubt on Andre's story. To the rest of the family, it felt like a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. They hadn't just lost their mother, they were grappling with mistrust toward their brother. It was impossible to comprehend why Colleen would leave her entire estate to Andre while excluding Monique, Fabian, and Julian, her eldest son, who had long been considered the natural choice to manage familial responsibilities. Colleen had always been fair, never showing favoritism among her children. This made the situation feel even more unreal. Julian eventually moved into Colleen's home to sort through her affairs. Grieving but determined, he began searching for key documents like her driver's license and personal records, but they were missing. Andre admitted he had taken them, claiming it was to facilitate the inheritance process. But then another strange discovery came to light. Andre had redirected all of Colleen's mail to his own address, despite the fact that Fabian and Monique were still living in her house. This deliberate act felt calculated and only deepened suspicions. As questions around Colleen's death intensified, so did doubts about Andre's motives. Could he have been capable of orchestrating his own mother's death for financial gain? Police reopened interviews, questioning not only Colleen's children, but also Andre's partner, Gracie, and others close to the family. In a significant development, Colleen's sister shared new information. She recalled driving past Colleen's house on the day Colleen died, around 1:30 p.m., and seeing an unfamiliar car in the driveway. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. But at Colleen's funeral, she saw the same car again, this time with Andre and Gracie getting into it. This raised alarming implications. Andre had been at the house much later than he had originally claimed. What's more, none of his siblings had been aware that he visited their mother that day. He had never mentioned it. When questioned by police, Andre admitted that he had visited his mother, Colleen, on the morning of May 25th, staying for about 45 to 50 minutes. He said she seemed deeply troubled, anxious about aging, and even questioned whether life was worth living. Using this as justification, he explained the life insurance policies he had taken out in her name, claiming she wanted to secure their family's financial future. However, Gracie offered a different account of that day. She recalled preparing to go out for lunch with her cousin when she noticed Andre had disappeared without saying anything. Concerned and frustrated, she repeatedly tried calling him, 12 times, according to her phone records, but he didn't answer. She eventually sent him a message, worried about his whereabouts. Andre returned at 2 p.m., acting as though nothing was wrong. While Gracie felt confused, she chose not to press him for details. Before they left for lunch, she remembered seeing a chilling text Andre had sent to Colleen, asking if she could babysit their son that evening. This struck investigators as unusual, considering what would soon happen. Their suspicions grew, and police obtained court approval to place covert surveillance devices in Andre and Gracie's home, a listening device in the bedroom and a camera in the living room. For 3 months, they closely monitored Andre and Gracie, hoping to uncover the truth. The recordings revealed shocking details. Gracie had no idea Andre had taken out life insurance policies in Colleen's name. When she found out, she was furious and confronted him. Her reputation and career were at stake. If the scandal went public, she risked losing sponsorships and brand deals. In one heated exchange, Gracie warned Andre that if he had killed Colleen and the truth was exposed, he would go to jail. Andre remained unfazed. He seemed confident he would receive the insurance payout and revealed plans to leave the country once the money came through. But why take such a risk? Although their social media profiles were filled with images of a lavish lifestyle of designer clothes, expensive vacations, a shiny white Range Rover, and a spacious home, the reality was quite different. Investigators discovered they were drowning in debt. The house they showed off was a rental, costing $880 a week. The Range Rover was financed, not owned. Many vacations were sponsored. Behind their polished online presence, their finances were falling apart. At the time of Colleen's death, they owed $120,000 and were months behind on rent and car payments. Gracie had an unpaid $40,000 tax bill she didn't even know existed because Andre controlled their finances. His cryptocurrency investments, once touted as their financial savior, had yielded a laughable $22 after 3 years. Desperate to sustain the illusion of wealth and escape their mounting debts, Andre devised a sinister plan. He took out 3 life insurance policies in Colleen's name, making himself the sole beneficiary. If everything went as planned, he stood to gain over $1 million, enough to pay off their debts and create the facade that his failed crypto investments had finally succeeded. In November 2022, Andre was arrested and charged with murdering his mother, Colleen. His trial began nearly 2 years later in October 2024 and lasted 8 weeks. There was no conclusive physical evidence linking him to the crime, and the exact cause of Colleen's death was never determined. However, expert witnesses explained that it is possible to suffocate someone without leaving visible marks. Minor abrasions were later discovered on Colleen's arms and eyebrows, suggesting a struggle or restraint. One theory proposed that a pillow may have been used to smother her, though this was never confirmed. During the trial, a timeline emerged that conflicted with Andre's claims. His aunt reported seeing his car parked at Colleen's house at 1:30 p.m., long after he claimed to have left. During that time, he ignored multiple calls from Gracie, which was unusual for him. Investigators also discovered that after July 2020, Andre had erased all data from his computer, no files, no browser history, nothing remained, as though he had intentionally deleted incriminating evidence. Additionally, troubling financial details came to light. Andre had taken out several insurance policies just days before Colleen's death. Afterward, he created forged documents, including a fake will, false medical records, an altered psychiatric report, and even an AI-generated voice recording, all aimed at covering up the crime. Despite his claims of innocence, Andre Rebello was found guilty of murder on December 5, 2024, after the jury deliberated for just 2 days. Finally, on Tuesday, April 1, 2025, Andre Rebello was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum parole period of 25 years for the brutal murder by the Perth Supreme Court. Faenza, an Italian city of roughly 50,000 people, is known for its relaxed atmosphere. Many residents have close relationships built on familiarity and trust. But in early 2021, An event involving Ilenia Fabri severely damaged that sense of trust, especially among those who knew her. On February 6, 2021, at dawn, police received a call from a young girl reporting an attack on her mother at their home in a residential area. Arriving at the villa, officers and paramedics found the front doors open. Inside, they discovered the body of Ilenia Fabri, 46. On the ground floor, she had a severe cut to her throat, along with multiple cuts on her body and head injuries, indicating she had been struck with a blunt object. At first, investigators thought the crime was a robbery that turned violent when Ilenia interrupted the burglar and resisted. But as they examined the crime scene and Ilenia's injuries more closely, the robbery theory seemed less probable. The violence used was too extreme for a typical robbery, suggesting Ilenia was intentionally targeted. The community was shocked and saddened by the news of the tragedy. Ilenia, known as a positive, friendly, and well-liked wife and mother, was highly regarded by everyone. She had many friends, acquaintances, and had worked for years as a secretary at her husband's car dealership. Concerned residents cooperated with the investigation, hoping to find the person responsible, ensure justice, and make their streets safe again. Ilenia seemed like the least likely person to be targeted by such violence. Initially, investigators found no obvious suspects among her close contacts, or at least very few. Seeking to uncover the mystery and identify the killer, detectives began meticulously examining Ilenia's life. They soon learned that she and Claudio Nani had divorced some time before, but their legal battles continued. Over the years, disagreements, exacerbated by financial issues, had strained their marriage. Ilenia, who had worked full-time in the business, believed Claudio had taken advantage of her. After the divorce, she sought substantial compensation, which he resisted, determined to leave her with nothing. Their conflict escalated into a lawsuit, and Claudio further aggravated the situation by attempting to prove his wife's alleged infidelity. He even placed a GPS tracker on her car, hoping to document her movements, but he couldn't prove anything. Ilenia quickly suspected something and discovered the device. She then filed a complaint alleging stalking and invasion of privacy, which only fueled their animosity. Claudio was the main suspect. Police investigated where he was when Ilenia was murdered. He was with his daughter, Arianna Nanni, at his house, which was near Ilenia's villa. Arianna said she arrived early that morning because they were driving to Osnago, Lecco, to get a new car. She confirmed that her father was with her the whole time and didn't leave the house. They had breakfast, and about 30 minutes later, they drove to a nearby city, a few kilometers into their trip. Arianna received an urgent phone call. Besides Arianna's statement, Claudio's phone records, including text messages and location data, supported his alibi, making it seem impossible for him to have committed the murder. Even though he had a strong reason to want Ilenia dead, it looked like he couldn't have done it. Communication with Claudio and Arianna allowed investigators to reconstruct part of the events. They were not far from the city when Arianna received a call from Arianna's friend, who reported that something bad was happening at Ilenia's house. According to him, screams were heard coming from the villa. By coincidence, Arianna's friend had been looking out the window and noticed a large, unfamiliar man entering the property. He looked threatening. Hearing about this, Arianna didn't want to continue the trip and insisted on returning home. It seemed to her that even Claudio was worried. She insisted that they both go back and find out what was happening. At the same time, Arianna kept in touch with her friend on the phone. The girl was very worried about her mother and asked the police to check the house. It took several minutes for Claudio's car to drive up to the villa at full speed. When talking to the police, Arianna repeatedly said that her father was also acting very worried and seemed anxious to find out what was going on. He stopped the car, got out, and went into the house, but ordered his daughter to stay in the car and not to get out under any circumstances. Arianna heard her mother's screams and couldn't restrain herself. She ran out of the car and across the courtyard. Along the way, she dialed the emergency number and called the police, something Claudio hadn't done. Just a few meters from the front door, the screams in the house stopped. When Ariana went inside, she saw her mother lying in a pool of blood, her throat deeply cut. Claudio wouldn't allow his daughter to remain at the crime scene. He took her outside to the car, where they waited for the police to arrive. Even when the carabinieri arrived, Ariana was shaking and hysterical, so shocked by what she saw that she could barely speak. She needed psychological help and time to recover. A little later, they were able to interview her at the medical center. Meanwhile, law enforcement officers were working at the crime scene, carefully analyzing the robbery scenario. However, it almost immediately became untenable. Given the degree of brutality of the attack on Elenia, the fact that she was chased throughout the entire house, as well as the fact that almost nothing was missing, also didn't align with the behavior of a robber. The strangest thing was that there was no sign of forced entry. This indicates that the attacker knows the door well or has his own key. Elenia managed to reach the second floor, but there was no escape from there. There were signs of a struggle found on the upper floor. The first drops of blood were found in the bedroom, but she died on the first floor. In her attempt to escape, Elenia splattered blood up the stairs and into several rooms. The killer caught up with her and finished her off on the lower floor. This also did not seem like the actions of a surprised robber. Having reconstructed the chronology of events, detectives began to focus on two main theories. Either the criminal knew Elenia and attacked her out of hatred, or she was an accidental victim of someone under the influence of illegal substances or a deranged individual. Almost from the beginning, the police had a description of the killer. After interviewing neighbors, as well as Ariana's friend, several people reported seeing a man breaking into the villa. They all described him as a tall, strong figure dressed in black. Unfortunately, his face was covered by a hood, so a more detailed description was impossible. Faenza had many CCTV cameras, and, curiously, Elenia's house was also equipped with a security system. However, by another strange coincidence, it was not working that day, making the crime look meticulously planned. One group of detectives analyzed Elenia's inner circle to understand who might have harbored enough hatred to kill her in broad daylight. Early on, the name of her ex-husband kept surfacing, and suspicions against him grew. Despite his alibi, another group collected data from CCTV cameras throughout the area, analyzing hundreds of hours of video footage. Additionally, all mobile phone records and calls made near the villa that day were meticulously checked. Elenia's ex-husband, Claudio, appeared to be involved once again, as a closer examination of their relationship revealed it had been toxic for many years. In fact, Elenia had been subjected to severe emotional and physical abuse by her husband on a regular basis, and had repeatedly contacted law enforcement and filed complaints. The first of these complaints was dated 2017, but the domestic abuse likely began much earlier. The last time she went to the police was just a few days before finally leaving Claudio. Elenia's friends and relatives said their relationship had been troubled for a long time, but Elenia was reluctant to leave her husband for the sake of the child. She believed it was better to raise her daughter with both parents. However, the atmosphere in the house became so toxic that she gradually began to doubt this idea. She left him with a sense of great joy and liberation. From that moment on, she tried to completely sever all contact with Claudio, as he used every opportunity to harass her. The carabinieri checked all leads and possible suspects, including Ariana. However, she was quickly eliminated as a suspect. As her father and mobile phone data confirmed her innocence, she had no motive and no disagreements with her mother. On the contrary, she was very worried about her. Ariana also didn't believe that her father could be involved. When she first heard the suggestion, she defended him, repeatedly stating that she was in a car with him a few kilometers from the villa when the attack took place. She pointed out that neither she nor her father fit the description of the attacker. The story that the father and daughter were going to Osnago, Lecco, to pick up a new car also proved true. As detectives contacted the dealership Claudio had mentioned, and the manager confirmed his story. However, according to witnesses to their relationship, Claudio was the only person in Elenia's inner circle who had a real motive and the desire to kill. As a result, his calls were tapped and his car was bugged. The last one that could be tracked was made in December 2020. There was also correspondence in the messenger, but they had been deleted, and the data could not be restored. This immediately attracted the attention. It was a period of pandemic and lockdown, but Claudio was actively discussing some business with an unknown person. There were several suspicious messages with ambiguous content that the men sent to each other. The owner of the number was identified quite quickly as Pierluigi Barbieri. His background was analyzed, revealing a rather turbulent criminal past with several convictions, including for violent crime. It seemed strange that a man like Claudio, who had his own business, a daughter, and once had a beautiful wife, would associate with such a suspicious and shady character. Pierluigi was quickly located. Living not far from Elenia's house in Faenza, the police immediately apprehended him for questioning. The first thing they wanted to know was his whereabouts at the time of the crime and the day before. Outwardly, he resembled the attacker described by witnesses. Early on, the investigators had a strong feeling they were on the right track. Pierluigi was reluctant to cooperate and wouldn't confirm any connection to the murder. However, his answers were contradictory and ambiguous. He chose his words carefully and hesitated before answering each question, which only strengthened the suspicion against him. The interrogation lasted for hours, but the seasoned criminal knew how to behave under pressure and remained unyielding. They needed something concrete to corner him. Detectives analyzed Pierluigi's mobile phone data and quickly confirmed that he was in the vicinity of Elenia's home when the crime was committed. He left home early in the morning, heading towards Elenia's residence. Next, they reviewed surveillance camera footage from streets along his likely route. A person matching the description was recorded on a parallel street. They investigated the areas where this person in dark clothes might have walked and managed to identify him before he reached the house. The investigation also revealed that a white car had driven past the villa 2 or 3 times in the hours before the murder. The license plate was identified, and the vehicle was registered to Pierluigi Barbieri. While this reinforced their suspicion, none of the cameras captured a clear image of his face. Moreover, investigators believed he hadn't acted alone. They suspected Elenia's ex-husband was involved in the planning, possibly ordering the murder. With Pierluigi as the executor, at the time of his arrest, Pierluigi was a 51-year-old resident of Faenza, with a reputation for aggression and close ties to the criminal underworld. He had served a long prison sentence, released in August 2020, for robbing a hair salon. At trial, he claimed he committed the crime to pay off debts. But it was part of a pattern. The investigation uncovered a similar, but more brutal, incident. Pierluigi broke into the home of a disabled man, kidnapped him, and forced him to withdraw all his money from an ATM, breaking several of his fingers in the process. The victim didn't report the crime, intimidated and afraid. Given the circumstances of Elenia's death and these revelations, detectives believe he may have intentionally targeted Elenia. The attack occurred after Ariana left home with her father to ensure her safety and provide an alibi for Claudio. This was likely Claudio's goal to target only his wife while creating an alibi that protected the rest of the family. The multiple drives past the house by Pierluigi suggest he was waiting for a signal or confirming that only his target was inside. By this point, Claudio's involvement in his ex-wife's murder was virtually certain. They believed he orchestrated and instigated the crime, hiring Pierluigi as the killer. Therefore, they had to have met to discuss the plan and payment, continuing the search for an undeniable connection between Pierluigi and Claudio. Investigators discovered that meetings had taken place in Claudio's garage shortly before the murder. Eventually, Pierluigi Barbieri confessed and began to reveal disturbing details of the brutal attack. He admitted that Elenia's murder was not a robbery gone wrong. He had originally gone to her house as a hitman hired by her ex-husband, Claudio, who provided him with the keys. and carefully laid out the instructions. It was a clear plan, meticulously planned down to the smallest detail. Claudio didn't want their daughter, Arianna, to suffer. But even she was part of his manipulation. Pierluigi and Claudio repeatedly discussed and refined the plan to ensure no delays. Unfortunately, there was no external confirmation of these discussions. Everything happened face to face, leaving no correspondence. The motive wasn't jealousy or hatred. Claudio simply didn't want to share money with his ex-wife. The idea of hiring a killer came when Ilenia filed a lawsuit, demanding fair compensation for her years of work in his workshop. He had never paid her a proper salary, only providing sporadic handouts. As she described it, as a result, she sought approximately 500,000 euros in compensation. From that moment on, Ilenia became a threat to his financial well-being. One he wanted to eliminate. Claudio approached Pierluigi, and they agreed on a price of 20,000 euros and a used car for the murder. As it turned out, this trip to Osnago, Lecco with Arianna, was not a gesture of paternal love. The cunning manipulator used his own daughter as a cover to establish his alibi. Pierluigi revealed another chilling detail. He wasn't supposed to use just any knife. Claudio provided it. It was a ceramic knife he had used to cut a cake the night before the murder. During a small anniversary celebration, after the crime, Pierluigi disposed of the knife. Despite detectives discovering the general location where it was discarded, it was never recovered. Early in the morning, as soon as Arianna left the villa with her father, Pierluigi knew that Ilenia was alone. He calmly entered using the key, provided by Claudio. He expected she to still be asleep. This miscalculation led to their plan's partial failure. Ilenia made a noise, attracting the attention of neighbors, and attempted to escape. Pierluigi pursued her upstairs to the bedroom. He initially attacked her with a hammer, striking her on the head. However, the blow was glancing, and Ilenia managed to partially dodge it. Bleeding, she ran up the stairs to the second floor and locked herself in the bathroom. The door could not stop Pierluigi, who was holding the hammer. He broke it down. Ilenia begged for mercy, but he struck her several more times on the head with the hammer, then began to strangle her. Still, she didn't give up. She screamed, fought back, and even managed to break free and run to the kitchen. Then, Pierluigi took out the knife Claudio had given him and began stabbing her repeatedly. The final, fatal blow was a deep cut to her throat. At that moment, the sound of wheels was heard outside. Arianna and Claudio are coming. Pierluigi simply left the house, overturning a few things along the way to stage a robbery. Naturally, this was not enough to fool the detectives. When the details of the crime became public, questions about the problem of femicide in Italy were once again raised. It was revealed that Ilenia had contacted a domestic violence center in 2017, but her pleas were simply ignored. The police's inaction and the impunity enjoyed by Claudio only emboldened his behavior. Subsequent appeals also went unanswered until after the divorce. This led to a conversation about how deeply rooted violence against women is and the major political and societal changes needed to stop it. This sentiment was echoed by detectives and the judge at the subsequent trials. When the police questioned Claudio about the hired killer, he continued to insist on his innocence. During the interrogation, Claudio had an outburst of anger, which only confirmed their suspicions. He quickly cracked and confessed to hiring Pierluigi. However, Claudio claimed that he did not intend for her to be killed, but only wanted to intimidate his ex-wife so that she would drop her financial demands and withdraw her statement. Both criminals were sent to different prisons to await trial. From prison, Claudio wrote a letter to his daughter, Arianna, expressing his regret for what had happened. He claimed he didn't want to kill Ilenia, only to scare her mother. Portraying it as a terrible accident, he claimed he simply chose the wrong person to carry out his plan. In the letter, he wrote that he was ashamed and wished he could disappear. Later, when Arianna was interviewed by journalists, she sided with Claudio, continuing to insist that he didn't want to kill Ilenia. She likely simply couldn't believe it. However, The facts left no room for doubt, and as a result, Claudio Nani and Pierluigi Barbieri were convicted and found guilty of premeditated murder, as well as planning the crime and attempting to obstruct the investigation. Claudio Nani and Pierluigi Barbieri were sentenced to the maximum possible punishment for the charges brought against them: life imprisonment. The sentences were upheld at every level of the judicial system. In January 2024, the Court of Cassation put an end to the legal proceedings, recognizing it as a deliberate and heinous crime. Both men involved in the crime lost any chance of receiving a reduced sentence. Even so, Arianna never lost faith in her father. She continues to try to maintain a relationship with him in every possible way and has also made attempts to have the court's decision reviewed. However, all efforts have been to no avail. Claudio and Pierluigi were also sentenced to pay €2 million in moral damages to Arianna in a civil suit. On October 8, 2003, two fishermen were exploring the coast off Cape May, New Jersey, in their new boat. They hadn't gone far from shore when they noticed something suspicious in the water. Curious, they initially thought it might be a dead animal. As they approached, they realized it was a woman's body. The fishermen immediately contacted law enforcement. The deceased was pulled from the water, and an attempt was made to identify her. Unfortunately, there was no identifying information. She was wearing clothes, but had no identification or distinguishing marks. The victim appeared young, with detectives estimating her to be under 20. Although the time spent in the water made it difficult to be certain, her body was in a deplorable condition, having been submerged for several days. Water accelerates decomposition, and the young woman showed numerous signs of marine life activity. A stone crab was found on her body, consuming the inside of her thigh. According to the forensic expert who performed the autopsy, the body had been adrift for more than a week, possibly even 2. Sea creatures hadn't thoroughly damaged the soft tissues yet. A piece of a large chain was found on her ankles, and her limbs were bound with adhesive tape. There were also signs of a struggle on the body, and investigators suspected she had been abused. However, even a thorough DNA examination proved impossible. As the water had washed away all traces of the perpetrator, the forensic expert believed the body had been submerged for a considerable time, likely near the seabed. The girl had probably been drowned using some form of weight that eventually broke free. Unfortunately, identification of the victims remains limited. Special features and evidence should be carefully examined before being released to the public. Even at this early stage, investigators anticipated that identification would be difficult. The forensic expert continued to examine the body for any clues that might shed light on the mystery of the girl's death. He wanted to know who she was, how she died. No gunshot wounds, stab wounds, or cuts were found. However, a fracture was discovered at the base of her skull. The specialist concluded that the force of the blow that caused this was equivalent to a fall from a height of 5 stories. Investigators attempted to obtain fingerprints, but her extended submersion in water made this challenging. The skin was severely swollen, requiring further processing of her fingertips to obtain reliable prints. Once obtained, the prints were checked against law enforcement databases and matched to a resident of Dover, Delaware, a small town located near Cape May, approximately 60 kilometers away. The victim was identified as 16-year-old Kimberly Holton. 2 detectives assigned to the case immediately went to the house where the girl lived. Her mother, who was intoxicated, opened the door. The woman was unaware of her daughter's whereabouts, as Kimberly had been living with another couple for several years. Through the mother, investigators learned another address. Kimberly lived in a mobile home located in a trailer park. The girl's adoptive mother opened the door to the detectives. As soon as the woman saw the police, she immediately became alarmed. realizing their arrival was connected to Kimberly. She told the detectives everything she knew about the girl. Kimberly had been born on November 4, 1986, and was just short of her 17th birthday at the time of her death. She had a difficult life from the start. Born into a dysfunctional family, her father had been incarcerated for most of her life and was expected to remain imprisoned for a long time due to numerous criminal offenses. Her mother suffered from addiction to illegal substances and alcohol and had long been indifferent to the girl's fate. Some relatives tried to help her in any way they could but lacked the means to adopt her. Despite these challenges, teachers at school described Kimberly as friendly, intelligent, and calm. She loved animals and aspired to become a veterinarian due to her amiable nature. In 2001, some of her parents' distant relatives, Ron Machette and Lorraine Machette, offered her a home in their trailer park. They had a daughter named Heather Nasakaitis, who had always wanted a sister. Thus, Machette managed to fulfill two dreams at once and helped Kimberly grow up in a more stable environment. Before moving in with Ron and Lorraine, Kimberly had been trying to find a better living situation. Away from her troubled parents, she even lived with her grandfather for a time, 2 years after moving in with her adoptive parents, who hadn't even formalized the adoption. Kimberly had died. According to Lorraine, she had last seen her adopted daughter 10 days before the police arrived at the trailer park, on September 29, 2003. This timeline confirmed the medical examiner's conclusion that the body had been in the water for a week or two. Lorraine also stated that she contacted law enforcement the day after Kimberly went missing. Lorraine explained that she wasn't particularly worried during the first few days of her disappearance, as it was normal for Kimberly, a teenager, to run away from home for a few days. Kimberly had done this many times before, often staying with friends for the weekend, but she would always return. It was thanks to this history that the girl was identified by fingerprints. Kimberly had been on the police database for a long time, simply because she had a tendency to run away from home. When Lorraine had gone to the police station to file a missing person report, the officer took the statement, wrote a report, and interviewed those closest to Kimberly. The policeman was interested in whether she had been seen, but he was unable to find any leads. Given her history of running away, the investigation into this case didn't receive enough attention. But time passed, and there was still no news from her until her body was found. It was immediately obvious that Lorraine was worried about Kimberly. Detectives decided to question Lorraine in more detail to understand Kimberly's relationship with those close to her. Investigators were interested in whether Kimberly could be connected to crime, whether she could have any enemies capable of such cruelty. First of all, they suspected Lorraine herself and her husband Ron, who were in the process of getting a divorce. 2 weeks before her disappearance, Kimberly had reported her adoptive father to the police, saying that he had gotten into bed with her and was molesting her. Lorraine confirmed these fears. According to Lorraine, she had noticed more than once that her husband was looking at Kimberly strangely. The act of molestation confirmed that he had an unhealthy attraction to children. His behavior was the reason for the divorce. After this story, suspicions about Ron only grew stronger. At first, Ron became the main suspect. They investigated him very thoroughly and found out he even had an alibi. Then, his words were confirmed. At the time of Kimberly's murder, he was behind bars. Since immediately after Kimberly's statements, he was arrested and charged with harassment. He spent several days in jail. At least during the time frame of the murder, Ron was cleared immediately. He clearly could not have been involved in the crime. The most significant challenge was the length of time the body had been submerged in the water. This likely washed away any traces of the criminal's DNA. Furthermore, forensic scientists in 2003 lacked access to the sophisticated tools available today. Tools that would allow them to carefully examine and collect minute particles of DNA. They were therefore compelled to focus on other evidence. They focused on the chain on the victim's leg and discovered the manufacturer's identification number. This allowed them to trace it to a chain of building supply stores operating on the East Coast. After checking the records, they found that the chain had been sold at one of those stores shortly before the crime. The investigators then located the manager who had made the sale. However, because the store was a supermarket frequented by hundreds of people daily, the seller couldn't recall every customer. Fortunately, the records allowed them to pinpoint the exact time and date of the purchase. Subsequently, the police were able to cross-reference this information with surveillance camera footage. All the cameras were functional in filming and recording. The chain store management cooperated fully, providing the necessary records. It was then easy to identify the two young men who had purchased the chain. The receipt also revealed that they had bought 2 cinder blocks, further solidifying the police's suspicions. Presumably, these weights had been used, along with the chain, to sink the body and hold it at the bottom. For some unknown reason, the pulleys broke, which aided in Kimberly's discovery before marine life could destroy the body. The police obtained images of the main suspects, but they were disappointed to find that the video, taken from a camera positioned under the ceiling, provided a poor angle. From this vantage point, the faces of the young men were not clearly visible, but it was apparent that they were between 20 and 25 years old. This clue prompted them to show the footage to the public and hold a press conference. A few days later, a man came to the police station, claiming to be one of the individuals recorded by the store camera. His name was Robert Brothers. However, he wasn't there to confess. He wanted to clear his name. He was visibly scared and explained that he had only accompanied his friend, Jacob Jones, who had asked him to help carry some heavy items at the hardware store. He confirmed that Jacob had purchased a chain and 2 cinder blocks, without fully explaining their purpose. When Robert inquired, Jacob was evasive but eventually admitted that the blocks were for some impromptu weightlifting. Robert knew that Jacob was suspected of involvement in the murder of a 16-year-old girl and was deeply concerned. Robert requested that his name be kept confidential and provided a detailed account. He maintained that he had merely assisted in carrying heavy items from the hardware store and loading them into his friend's car, and he had no idea what happened to them afterward. This led detectives to their prime suspect, 20-year-old Jacob Jones. Investigators began to investigate how to connect Jacob to Kimberly's family. It turned out that he was Heather's boyfriend. Heather was about the same age as Kimberly, and they had been living together for the past 2 years. Those close to them described the girls as being very close. They became good friends and even shared clothes to resemble twins. Or so they thought. However, some claimed that the girls didn't get along and often argued. Suspicions and circumstantial evidence mounted. When Robert was approached again and asked why Jacob might have killed Kimberly, he suggested that Heather, who was jealous of Kimberly's beauty, could have been involved. Detectives spoke to Heather. She appeared as concerned about Kimberly's disappearance as her mother. However, like the rest of the family, she initially believed that her adopted sister had simply run away again and would soon return. Her concern only grew when her mother contacted law enforcement and reported Kimberly missing. As days passed without Kimberly's return, the situation became increasingly tense. Heather told detectives that after Kimberly's disappearance, she had sought comfort and support from her boyfriend, Jacob, but he had shown complete indifference. Heather perceived this as uncaring and insensitive, but nothing more. She didn't believe Jacob was capable of murder. Even during her initial interview with the detectives, Heather didn't raise any suspicion. She seemed sincere, cooperative, and provided all the information requested of her, claiming to have had nothing to do with her sister's death. Subsequently, Jacob was brought in for questioning. From the outset, he appeared nervous. He admitted to buying the chains and cinder blocks at the store but claimed that he had used them for other purposes. However, he refused to disclose where they were now. It was evident that he was concealing something. Just moments into the conversation, after they began questioning him more closely about Kimberly, Jacob requested a lawyer and refused to cooperate further. At the same time, Jacob confirmed that he knew about the crime because both Lorraine and Heather had spoken about it. With no specific evidence to present, law enforcement was forced to release him for the time being. Interviews with Jacob's colleagues and friends revealed that he had been acting unusually lately. He had become short-tempered, aggressive, and prone to lateness or even absenteeism, behaviors that were out of character for him. No one in Jacob's social circle could explain this sudden change. Just 2 weeks after Kimberly's body was recovered from the water, Heather and her boyfriend, Jacob, were having lunch at a cafe. Heather directly asked Jacob if he had been involved in her sister's murder. His reaction was peculiar. According to Heather, he responded that his lawyer had forbidden him from discussing it with anyone. Heather was shocked. She had expected a more open response, an angry denial of guilt, or something else that would demonstrate his innocence. At that point, Heather began to suspect that Jacob was acting suspiciously. Despite her growing doubts, she still found it hard to believe that her boyfriend could have committed such a brutal act as killing her sister. Detectives decided to investigate Jacob's background more thoroughly. At the time of the crime, Jacob was 20 years old and had recently graduated from high school. By most accounts, he seemed like a good person. He had even earned his pilot's license at 16 and always dreamed of flying. He seemed like a promising young man, and his qualifications were unusual for someone so young. He appeared responsible and had no history of violence. However, disturbing information soon surfaced. Several witnesses confirmed that Jacob and Kimberly did not get along. Kimberly often picked on him, even in Heather's presence, constantly calling him Four Eyes because he wore glasses. Some people knew she teased him because he wanted to become a fighter pilot, and she mocked his vision problems, insisting he would never succeed. They had even had arguments about it. The more the detectives investigated the relationship between the two, the clearer it became that Kimberly frequently teased and irritated Jacob. However, this still didn't seem like enough of a reason to kill her. But the coincidences were mounting and becoming too obvious to ignore. Detectives obtained a warrant for Jacob's arrest and immediately went to his house. As the police approached, they noticed suspicious activity. Jacob's parents were outside, his mother was hysterical, and paramedics were inside. Jacob had shot himself in the head with a shotgun minutes before the police arrived, dying instantly. The dead boy's father spoke to the detectives, revealing that Jacob had confessed to killing Kimberly Holton the day before. At the same time, Jacob claimed that another person, 23-year-old Michael Kaiser, whom he had met while working as a security guard at the racetrack, was also involved. Jacob referred to himself as an accomplice, shifting most of the blame onto Michael. Michael and Jacob weren't particularly close, but their paths often crossed at work. Michael was easily located and expressed shock that his friend had taken his own life. However, he denied being the mastermind behind Kimberly's murder, claiming he was only an accomplice. He insisted that Jacob had forced him to commit the brutal act, describing Jacob as a dangerous, cruel, and manipulative person who should be feared. Michael immediately invoked his right to a lawyer and initially refused to cooperate with the investigation. However, with a little pressure, he began to talk. According to Michael, the motive was Kimberly's constant embarrassment, mockery, and humiliation of Jacob, often in front of Heather. Jacob had simply grown tired of it. Michael claimed that Jacob even avoided going to Heather's house if Kimberly was there. However, the detectives suspected that this wasn't the whole truth. It seemed strange that a young man as driven as Jacob, who had earned his pilot's license at 16, excelled in school and at the University of Delaware, and worked as a freelance flight instructor at the Air Force Base, would simply throw his life away. Unfortunately, Jacob, the only one who could provide his side of the story, was dead. Detectives pressed Michael for a more truthful account. According to him, on the night of September 29 to 30, he and Jacob picked up Kimberly from the trailer park, where she lived with her foster family. Jacob instructed Michael to do this because he didn't want to be identified by any witnesses in the area. Michael was then supposed to take Kimberly to a secluded house so Jacob could discuss their differences with her. Initially, Michael believed that Jacob simply wanted to scare her and make her stop bullying. According to Michael's version of events, they then went to a store near a building supply center, where Jacob, Michael, and Kimberly bought alcohol and snacks. Afterward, the three went to a nearby motel. There, the discussion quickly escalated into intimate. Michael claimed that they had intimate with Kimberly, one after the other, with her mutual consent. Afterward, Kimberly went to the shower, and when she came out, Jacob suddenly attacked her, pinning her to the floor and choking her. She lost consciousness after receiving several blows. Michael claimed that Jacob kicked her. Michael said he tried to stop Jacob, but Jacob was stronger and pushed him aside. After Kimberly stopped showing signs of life, Jacob forced Michael to help him secure her ankles with duct tape and wrap her in a blanket. They then attached a chain and cinder blocks to her leg. They loaded the body into the trunk of Jacob's car and drove to the air base on the outskirts of town where Jacob worked. They then loaded the body onto a plane that Jacob used and took off, flying over the Atlantic Ocean. Jacob descended and slowed down. Michael helped throw the body overboard. Detectives believe that this action ruined their plans. As the body was dropped from too high an altitude, the strong impact of the water caused the cinder blocks to break and detach from the chain, and the body sustained a fracture at the base of the skull. The medical examiner determined that the injury was sustained posthumously from a fall from a great height. This version of Michael's confession also seemed unconvincing. It seems strange that a conversation intended to clarify the relationship would suddenly lead to intimacy. It also seemed implausible that Jacob would spontaneously attack Kimberly when she came out of the shower. After all, there was no obvious reason for it at that moment. The supposed conflict had seemingly been resolved. Therefore, Michael's confession did not inspire confidence in the police. However, the second part of the confession, regarding the disposal of the body, it seemed more credible. It aligned with the fact that Kimberly's body remained undiscovered for a little over a week before being found near the coast. Michael's story about the body being dropped from the air was officially corroborated when the radar data tracking the flight from the airfield was reviewed. It confirmed that they had indeed left the airbase. That night, the plane flew close to the area where the body was later found, made a wide circle, and returned to the base early in the morning. After searching the dorm room where Jacob was staying, the police found a motel receipt dated September 30. The day Kimberly was killed, detectives spoke to Heather again and told her Michael's story. She also believed he was lying and had, in fact, orchestrated the whole thing. She had only ever heard bad things about Michael, describing him as violent and suspicious. Heather was sure that Kimberly hated Jacob, so there was no way she would have had consensual intimate with him or with Michael. Heather was certain that Michael's story was mostly a lie. At the very least, she believed that he had abused Kimberly and was now trying to justify his actions by claiming mutual consent and blaming Jacob, who could no longer refute his accusations. Only 2 days after Michael's arrest, during a routine morning check, a guard discovered that he had attempted to end his own life in his cell, using his shoelaces. Fortunately, he was found in time, with a pulse still beating. Michael was taken to the mid-sanction unit for treatment and then transferred to a ward for rehabilitation and recovery. His actions were regarded as a cowardly attempt to avoid justice, prompting psychiatric evaluations to assess his mental state. Michael was then placed under observation due to the high risk of repeated his own life attempts. In January 2004, the trial began, where Michael was tried for complicity in the murder of Kimberly Holton. The prosecution presented a considerable amount of evidence, though almost all of it was circumstantial. Michael then retracted his confession, and his lawyer attempted to explain it away as a result of insanity. His story about an end his own life attempt sounded particularly compelling. The prosecutor, however, emphasized that the confession contained many details that had never been published but were verifiably true. He argued that only someone involved in the crime could have known those details. Numerous witnesses testified, corroborating the chronology of events as described by Michael. While awaiting trial and afterward, Michael underwent several evaluations by specialists. Psychiatric experts deemed him extremely immature for his age and easily manipulated, which, they argued, explained his participation in the crime. Experts say that Michael, as a henchman, was simply an accomplice who could not resist Jacob's threats. Crucially, Jacob had a clear motive. Michael was repeatedly offered a plea deal for second-degree murder, which would have resulted in an 18-year prison sentence. However, he consistently refused, convinced that he would be acquitted of murder charges. Throughout this time, he maintained his innocence. Even his lawyer believed he should accept the prosecutor's offer, but Michael adamantly refused. On January 16, the jury began deliberations and ultimately found Michael Kaiser guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was, however, fortunate in a way, as the state increased penalties for such charges a few years later, meaning he could have faced the death penalty. From the beginning of his imprisonment, Michael frequently incurred disciplinary infractions. He was caught with contraband on several occasions and was periodically placed in solitary confinement due to his problematic behavior. Currently, Michael remains in custody at the correctional center. His lawyer has made multiple attempts to challenge the court's decision, but all appeals have been rejected. Heather was never charged with any crimes related to the case. Despite some believing, she also had a motive to eliminate her annoying sister. Heather has since moved to Colorado, started a new life, and graduated from college. She, along with her mother, Lorraine, has spoken to reporters on several occasions. They grieved deeply for 16-year-old Kimberly. They believe that the two young men had brutally harmed Kimberly out of enjoyment or out of resentment, but they continue to blame only Michael for this. Her family tried to assist Kimberly, who was born to addicted parents associated with crime, but they were unable to do so.